B1, Chapter 11, Final Hope, 1. Seriously? HBRS. You know that looks like hubris, right, honey? The DOD's gonna think you're angling to be the next Einstein. Who says I'm not? Dr. Ava Sherman. Manchester, New Hampshire. 5 years before. Mother, a nurse shouted. This one won't stop shaking and we can't figure out why. She went over to the patient. Male, late 30s, if not early 40s, an advanced necrosis of the skin. His eyes were dimmed but not hollowed, and stitches in his chest had been ripped during the seizures. Mother dabbed her finger into the wound and gave it a sniff. The taste was unmistakable. You've been abusing wrath, haven't you? The patient grit his teeth. She turned back to the nurse. Tie him down and give him 100 milligrams of saline straight into the spinal cord. That would offset the chemical deficiency. No sooner had this patient started to level out than another voice rolled her way. Please, mother, a doctor called out. This woman's leg won't reattach like it's supposed to. The fault was amateurish to her experienced eyes, as they had accidentally rotated the limb by about 5 degrees during the rejoining phase. She pressed her arms against bone and crunched down with all her might. The patient grunted as her flesh moved like clay. She'll need compression and rest, mother said. The nerve endings won't form again for a few days. An echo rolled down the hall. Hollow. Mother recognized the patient on sight. Well over 300 pounds, he was one of the more colossal workers who'd been subjected to construction work. The kind of rates so large that the standard issue distribution diet couldn't keep pace with his body's demands, and with a form of employment that never paid him enough to get ahead of his own hollowing. Staff and patients alike shrieked as the gargantuan hollow stumbled down the hall, but Mother maintained her serenity. Where all others ran, she faced the patient head-on, meeting the empty, white gaze of HBRS 15.21 in its purest form with her hardened own. She would not let it claim victory here. As the patient made his predictable lunge, she sidestepped the attack and delivered a riposte to his leg. He floundered into the ground with a smash. Mother threw all her weight onto his back and secured his arms between hers. Handcuffs. A pair of doctors rushed over and tied the patient's arms in place. His teeth clattered this way and that until a nurse managed to throw a bag over his head. The troop began the arduous task of shepherding him back to the rehabilitation center. Mother let out a sigh. Of all the work in her medical center, triage was the most demanding. Like bailing water out of a sinking ship a cup at a time, the holes kept forming, and the hollowing kept rising. It couldn't be helped. There weren't enough qualified physicians in Pandemonium, and Reitzer anatomy was as foreign to them as anyone else. Except her. Mother knew every nuance of HBRS 15.21. There was no one more qualified to patch these holes and handle the infinite threat of the hollowing. Everyone else was gone, whether through the outbreak, or the destruction that followed. That was why she could not lose. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Thank you, Mother, Elsa said. You didn't have to do this yourself. She patted her on the forehead. We take care of our own here. You know that. Mother went back to stitching. Elsa was one of her more recent nurses, and was still adapting to her work in post-hollow rehabilitation, but between her previous job as a maiden in Elysium's lust pits, and an injury she gained during her HBRS 15.21 exposure, her lungs filled with fluid over the course of the day, and had to be sliced open and drained, thrice a week, lest her own mental degradation accelerate. Mother had made a habit of personally overseeing the procedure whenever she had the chance. Her people deserved to see that they mattered. As the last stitch fell in place, Elsa began to cry. The reddish fluid ran down her cheeks, a mix of tears and blood. Don't cry, Elsa, Mother said. We're done for today. I'm sorry, but I can't. Every day I feel the pressure, and every breath keeps getting worse and worse. I can't do this anymore. I've told you before, there are options. We could apply a stent to let it drain naturally, or we could contract a hunter to find a worthwhile replacement. Oh sure, she mocked. One is to carry a bag filled with shit everywhere I go, and the other will force me back to Elysium just to pay off the debt. Such good choices. They're the only ones we have. No, they're not. I've been talking to some of the others, and they told me about the basement. I know. Mother said nothing. Every power broker in Pandemonium had their secrets, and she was no exception. Not all patients were guaranteed to survive, and not all operations ended in success. Beneath the refuge of Mother's Grace was a labyrinth of freezers and laboratories, and it was in those hidden cells that she performed the necessary acts to keep Pandemonium afloat. You shouldn't ask about that, Mother said at last. It's okay. You can trust me. I understand why you do it. Elsa closed her eyes, and a fresh wave of fluid spilled free. Which is why I'm willing to join voluntarily. Mother's chest tightened. To see Elsa speak this way hurt more than she could know. She was really coming to like her, and her sad, innocent eyes reminded her of Evelyn. It would be devastating to see Elsa go. But Mother was also the matriarch of this hospital, and could not show weakness under any circumstance. Is that what you want, Elsa? She asked. You really want to let it end? She shook her head. Anything is better than this. Even nothingness. I can't keep living like this. Living. What a strange and ineffable concept to those who had never truly known it. Reitzers weren't like their human frames. They were just dead meat puppets with a semi-functioning cerebrum attached. Parasites whose hosts had long since died out. Could they ever contemplate such a phenomenon? Mother reached into her lab coat and pulled out the bottle of her private pills. Hades had his sins in Elysium, and she had her bliss. Where the sin stimulated parts of the native nervous system to give them a heightened sense of emotion, Bliss performed the opposite. It was her crowning achievement of Reitzer-specific medication. A drug that could give them the one thing they couldn't gain naturally, peace of mind. A single pop, and even the most nourished undead would drift off into a state of comfortable hibernation, never to return if the regiment was maintained. Are you absolutely sure you want this, Elsa? Mother asked, her tone firm. There's no going back once you're down there. She met her in the eyes, unblinking. Yes. Then take one of these. She handed her the pill. Elsa gripped the bliss between her soft, fragile fingers. For a moment, the two just sat in silence as the severity of the act weighed on them. She might not have known what was to come next, but Mother had stared enough hopeless patience to know the burden that she was subjecting them to. Her research was seldom clean. Elsa swallowed the pill. Thank you for everything, Mother. It is I who owes you. You're braver than you know, Elsa, and our kind owes you a debt that it will never be able to repay. Thank you for your sacrifice. Elsa nodded. Within minutes, her eyes glazed over one last time and her awareness became expunged. Mother threw a sheet over her face with a sigh. How many more would have to be sacrificed on the altar of science? Her operation in the basement was a far cry from that which she had rebuilt in secret out east, but there was no telling just how many of her patients had been dragged down below, never to be seen again. All for the greater good, of course. Understanding the mutations that HBRS 15.21 inflicted required experimentation, and there were no subjects more efficient to utilize than Reitzers. Every development, from the sins of Elysium, to Bliss, to her breakthroughs on nutrition science, had all come at a high blood toll. And still it had not been enough. One of her surgeons entered, his arms and scrubs caked in blackened viscera. What is it? Mother asked. We have a visitor. He gulped. It's Hades. B1, chapter 11, Final Hope, 2. Hades was wandering around Mother's office, examining all in sight with the extemporaneous curiosity he always had when bored. His bright red eyes narrowed on Mother's when she entered. Of all the infected she had encountered over the years, there was none with a stronger reservoir than him. Hades, she said with a nod, closing the door behind. His mummified cheeks stretched into a grin. How's it Hanjin, Mommy? Still cutting up corpses to sew onto other corpses. Spare the pleasantries. We both know why you're here. He rolled his eyes. You're no fun. It's Saturday and the night is young. You should enjoy yourself for once. I've always wanted to see you on your back and in the thralls of sloth. No. There's your answer, to both offers. See, now I'm starting to get upset. At least Leah played along. But you? Too much time stuck in this shithole has made you a stick in the mud. He sighed. Fine then, I'll make this easy for both of us. No deals, no negotiations. There's a living human in this building, and I want to know where you've stashed him. Mother raised an eyebrow. Leah didn't tell you. Perhaps there was hope yet. Forget about her. You're willing and dealing with me now, sweetheart. Tell me where he's hiding or I start bashing skulls. She could see his signature weapons at his hip, a LE matte revolver with its buckshot center barrel and black powder firing main cylinder, and a high-carbon, stainless steel machete with a bolo design and grip reinforced. Hades wouldn't bring either out of Elysium unless he was planning to use them. His hunting days were long since past. But still, Mother couldn't break. No. He's our only hope. Hope, hey? Been hearing that word a lot lately. Between the natural decomposition of his neglected skin and the loss of all moisture to the muscles beneath, reading Hades's emotional state through his facial expressions was difficult for even the most seasoned poker player. He was like her, and did not show anything more than he chose. But Mother had been dealing with him since the beginning of her own resurrection, and had learned to read the tiniest twitches that slipped free. So when Hades went to the door and snapped his fingers, she knew that this would not end well. You, he called out. Yeah, you. Over here. There you go. That's a good girl. One of the nurses walked in, and Hades shut the door behind. She looked nervously from one to the other. Mother grew maced. You don't have to do th. Blackened ichor exploded as Hades cleaved his machete through the nurse's neck. Before her body had even hit the ground, he dug his gloved hands into the base of her skull and wrenched out a fistful of brain. He began to gorge on the chunk, all while the nurse's dead eyes bulged from her head. Woo! Hades roared, the juices running down his chin. What a fucking rush. The tears came before Mother could stop them. Her name was Kimberly. She liked romance novels and crochet. Once a week, she would convince someone new to go to the movie theater with her. Sometimes ex-patients, sometimes friends. Hades munched on more of her brain. Can't say Ole Kimberly was much of a heavy thinker if you ask me. So where's the human? More tears began to form, but Mother blinked them back. I can't let you do this. Well, all right then. He went back to the door. Wait, she said, the word heavy on her tongue. Before she could regret her decision, she went to her desk. You want to talk? Let's talk. Hades took the cue and sat across, still scooping more gray matter free. Don't mind me. Killing indiscriminately always gives me the munchies. She tilted her head. There are more than 25,000 Reitzers in Pandemonium, jammed in a space designed to hold a third of that population. Every single one of them requires an average of 500 calories of living flesh per day to keep their bodies sustained, and a variable quantity of gray matter per week to keep their reservoir stable, books or not. Hades slurped some of Kimberly's spinal fluid, This again. Even with the industrial cattle farm that you set up and the hundreds of hunters that scour the wastes, there just isn't enough living matter to keep us sustained, let alone growing. Hollowing won't stop no matter how hard you make everyone work. Boring. Hades jammed his hand back into Kimberly's skull. And this comes before our technical needs. Solar panels can only last for so long. Our plumbing system is rusting from the outside in. These buildings are crumbling around us. We can only do so much to reinforce them against minor tremors. Never mind if a major earthquake strikes again. Hades manipulated his fingers into Kimberly's severed head. Look at me, I'm Mother, he murmured with a feminine voice, moving the jaw like a puppet. I like droning on and on about boring statistics and dead chicks. It doesn't matter who you strong-arm or how many enemies you destroy. 10 years, maybe 15, and this is all gone. She stared deep into his eyes, hoping to inject some semblance of reason. Our world is dying. No. It's already dead. He winked, still holding the head. Come on, Mommy. You and Hades used to be in this together. What happened to you two? Mother grit her teeth. What you are doing is different from when we were young, Hades. This is no longer defense. It's genocide. He crunched down Kimberly's head an inch. The muscles in her brow tightened, almost angrily. You're lucky that Lord Hades likes you so much. He's a big fan of the sciences. Got him all the sins, didn't you? Well, don't think that gives you a free ride. More tears sprung free. Please stop doing that. Talk to the head, Hades said in his normal voice. She turned to Kimberly. The eyes were still locked in that cold, shocked death stare. Please stop. Thank you, he muttered one last time before tossing her severed head across the room. So as I was saying. I like you, Mother. In many ways, you've made me who I am, and I'd like to think that I did the same. He winked. Mother massaged her mark and shivered. But don't think for a second that I won't burn this place down if I have to. Why are you like this? There was once a time when Hades had a conscience, where he only killed anyone who threatened them and not the other way around, but somewhere along the way and after destroying too many human hideouts, he seemed to know no other way. No longer was there any goal, any aim, nor sight for anything more than the current day. It was like he'd become the physical embodiment of HBRS 15.21 itself, and was capable of nothing other than death, destruction, and faux resurrection into something lesser than before. What could Mother do against such mindless fury? What could anyone do? To stand against this unstoppable wave was akin to facing the hollowing itself. The end was inevitable, and the only choice offered was between a short or agonizing demise. Unilateral surrender was the rational option, and the one she had chosen again and again. But maybe it didn't have to be this way. Maybe intellect could surpass infinite cruelty. You win, Hades, Mother said. I will bring you to him myself. He beamed. About fucking time. Mother moved down the halls with care and straddled the time as best she could. Hades marched by her side with a group of his loyalists to their flank, knocking through the doctors and patients alike as though they were brush in a forest. Only Kurt stood in their way, his sledgehammer in hand. Leah had recruited him as a hunter personally, and now Mother could see why. Even outnumbered, outgunned, and with no explanation at hand, he stood opposed to Hades, a monolith against the rising tide. No one gets in here unless Leah lets them, Kurt said. Hades grunted. Are you shitting me? You do know who I am, right, asshole? He nodded. Of course, Lord Hades. I'm forever thankful for what you've done for Pandemonium. Good. Now step aside. Not without hearing from Leah. His eyes bulged and he drew his LE mat. You motherfucking piece of SH. Mother threw herself in between. Enough. Kurt, this isn't worth getting purged over. We wouldn't be here if Leah hadn't made her choice. She raised her voice, loud enough to be heard from within. Now let Hades get inside. This is my hospital, and you will do what I say. She must have overdone the act because Hades shot a venom-laced glare her way and bolted for the door. Kurt was thrown off balance by the sudden charge, and could not stop him from entering. Mother ran in after, with Kurt following in her wake. Hades stood with his fists squeezed into balls. Kurt rubbed his head in confusion. And Mother grinned. The room was empty. Find him. Hades ordered. Find anyone. Lock down this whole fucking place if you have to. He turned to Mother. Don't you dare fucking start. I'm not done with you. And neither am I with you. She had won the night, but the war was just beginning. Whether Hades knew it or not, Mother held the advantage here, and she would do everything and anything to leverage her end. This world would be saved, and nothing would stop her. B1, Chapter 12, next. 1. The dead are getting smarter, Harry. Then we've gotta get meaner. Only way we're getting through this is if we kill every single one of those thinkers on sight. It's either us or them. Harold Harry Pfeiffer. San Jose, California. 4 months after. Oh, how Leah could not have felt more low than now. She yanked off her scarf and puked onto the sidewalk. What a night. She'd had every intention of leaving Elysium the moment she had finished with Hades, but somehow, someway, she'd wandered into a room filled with rookie hunters, and then there was a cap of gluttony in her stomach. Next thing she knew, Leah was raging with a group of construction hulks until the sun was up, punching and laughing at all in sight, her mind caught in some nebula between pride and envy. Now the come down was hitting her hard, and Leah would never put a single thing into her mouth ever again, unless it was perhaps a bullet. Physical pain wasn't a sensation she could experience, but discomfort was no stranger to a Reitzer. Whether it was the pang of the hunger in their chests, the slow but steady rot of their flesh, or the perpetual albatross of harrowing, no one could go a day without feeling the effects of one ailment or other. So it wasn't unfair to claim that the malaise she was feeling now was worlds worse than any of those daily torments combined. Why had Leah done this to herself? It had been years since she had been seduced by Elysium. Why now? She clutched her stomach and retched up another wave of black bile. The answer was obvious. Leah had allowed herself to succumb to the snare of solipsism, and had made a decision she preferred not to think about. There was still work to do, and more misery to endure, and she suspected that when she came out the other end of this mess, there would be many more nights like that one. Nothing was ever easy, was it? Leah stumbled down the street. Her vision blurred and then focused, and she realized that Kurt was standing in front. She marched over. "What are you doing here?" "The human got away," he said. Her hangover evaporated in a wave of hot rage. "What?" "Kept my eye on the door like you said. Didn't let anyone in. Even had a close call with Hades when he came knocking, but I wasn't about to give him up without a fight." Shit. She'd forgotten to give Kurt the heads up. Too busy basking in a sea of gluttony. She rubbed her forehead. "It's okay, Kurt. Just tell me what happened." "The human had split before Hades got there. Best way I can figure it is that Mother pulled a fast one on us. Gave us a room where she knew he could slip out. And you didn't think to check for that. Didn't know she wasn't on our side." "Our side? You poor, naive idiot." Of course Leah had only picked Kurt from a crowd because he could carry more than a truck and could hit like one too. What the hell did he know about having to take sides? "Get the others," she ordered. "And so help me, Kurt. If we don't get to the human before someone else, you're out. You hear me? You can go back to wall repairs for all I fucking care." His crimson eye narrowed on hers. A tear grew. "Come on, boss. You don't mean that." Was he really trying to gild her now? Leah grit her teeth. "You had one fucking job last night. That was it." "What? You want to mope now? I told you when we started that hunting wasn't all fun and games. Sometimes you have to use the fucking brain that I spent all those pics building for you." He frowned. "I'm sorry." She should have stopped there, but pride was still fresh in her veins. "Sorry isn't good enough, Kurt. I want results. Now find Buttercup and Mastermind. Maybe they'll be less useless than a hollowed-out sack of shit like you. Go." He scurried off in silence, and for a moment, Leah almost regretted going off on him. Almost, anyway. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. "You know the deal," Leah said. "Sweep Tartarus. Top to bottom. Throw picks into holes and see what comes crawling out. We've got thousands to burn, and he's gained less than 8 hours on us. That's nowhere near enough time to disappear in a city this small." "What about me, Mum?" Mastermind asked. "I won't bear much success intimidating the ruffians of Tartarus with my frame. You go check with Karen. See if anyone tried to cross the sticks. She wouldn't put it past him." "Guess I'll start with the Lust Maidens," Buttercup said with a laugh. "Those girls love me." "Don't fuck around," Leah snapped. "I don't want to hear that you got juiced on greed an hour from now, and didn't find shit because of it." He straightened himself. "Of course, boss. Wouldn't dream of it." "Good." She turned back to Kurt. "If Buttercup's searching the east, you're coming in from the west. Start at Municipal and head to Elysium. Leave no stone unturned. I won't let you down. I mean it. No mistakes and no pussyfooting this. Can I count on you?" He gripped the hilt of his sledgehammer and bowed. "I won't stop until I find him. I'll smash half of Tartarus into the pavement if I have to. Don't just say it then. Do it. Or else." Leah was sober now, and after a fresh meal, her res was back to full strength, but still she wouldn't allow herself to go easy on Kurt. This fuck-up hadn't just put him in jeopardy. If Leah had allowed the one survivor of humanity to have slipped free on her watch, and the bubble of information kept growing, then this was a huge fucking crisis, and she could kiss her deal with Hades goodbye. And all Leah had to keep from facing his wrath was this motley crew. How the hell had she let herself become so vulnerable? "I'm off to the lodge. It's the only other landmark he knows." She pointed to Kurt and Buttercup. "You two don't report back until sundown. We'll figure out the next move from there if he's still missing." She nodded to Mastermind. "You get back to me as soon as you talk to Karen. If he turns up nothing, then I guess it's combing through Asphodel next. Maybe even Municipal." She furrowed her brow. "Do I need to repeat myself?" All shook their heads in unison. "Remember what's at stake here. You have to find him, but you can't let anyone know he's alive. It's a tighter job than we've dealt with before, but it's one I can't have any of you fuck up." "Don't worry," Mastermind said. "This is the break we've been looking for. We won't let you down." "Yes." Leah swallowed the lump in her throat to bury the lie. "This is for us." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The fine-trimmed hedges of the lodge glistened in the morning sun. A troop of vets at a nearby table regaled a story of a hollow herd they'd once managed to trap in an underpass before detonating the bridge above. A boss was negotiating a contract with a fresh crew. Cleaners were sweeping the lobby of dust and leaves. And Leah brooded alone, drinking a mug of thinned goat's blood through a straw as she thought of how to climb out of this pit. At least the infused honey was giving her a boost. The human hadn't shown his face around the lodge either. She had kicked down the appropriate doors and interrogated everyone in sight, but no one had seen anything to match his description, Reitzer garb, or not. He could have swapped clothes. Shit. Leah was truly flying blind on this. She hadn't had a hunt this delicate since the Beverly Butcher was clearing whole hunter crews. Or perhaps it was more appropriate to consider how she'd dealt with the Tartarus 5. That had been a real nightmare and ended up pissing off half the unions. But this was different. Where Hades had given her his full support, she was doing everything she could to avoid his wrath. And unlike before, her manpower was a fraction of what it had once been. Downsizing has its detriments. They might as well have been searching for a needle in an ever-shifting pile of needles. Why wouldn't the living just die already? A shadow passed over her seat. It was dressed in the most exaggerated caricatures of how ancient hunters used to look. Starting from the reinforced leather boots with iron plating that ran up the knee, and going into the silk tunic above that, and the long, black cloak above that. The arms had been bolstered with cured leather, and bandoliers had been strung over the shoulders, stopping only at the cutlass on the waist. Between the raised neck warmer and the oversized leather cap with an eagle's feather sticking out, only his dark red eyes could be seen. Leah sighed. What do you want, Xander? Heard about Spike? Got wasted with his crew, only a few miles from here. News to me. The contract's gonna be big. Half the lodge will be throwing in to oust the traitor. She crossed her arms. What makes you think it's one of us? Who else would it be? Hollows didn't do it, and bandits don't come this close. We're talking someone with skills. He stared deep. Someone who's mastered the hunt. Leah didn't like the way Xander was watching her. Who posted the contract? Might just be some bored worker trolling us. He shook his head. Not this time. You can thank Hades himself for this one. Figures. He was ramping up pressure on Leah to get this mess cleaned up. No doubt that someone else would find their way under the bus the moment she had her hands on Liam Fenix, but until then, she might as well feel the heat of an army of bloodthirsty hunters on her back. Leah raised an eyebrow. This some roundabout way of asking that we team up? Nope. Spike was one of mine, so I'm doing this myself. Just giving you the heads up. Hunter's honor and all that bullshit. Don't worry though, I'll find the killer, and bring him in myself. He turned to leave. Or her. Xander marched off, leaving Leah alone. She gave her morning blood a long, hard swallow. This was going to get a whole lot messy before it got cleaner. Xander was to hunting what Kurt was to fighting. A blunt instrument sent to crush everything in his path, no matter the collateral damage. Most of his contracts involved clearing hollow herds, but he wasn't above exterminating enclaves if given the task. His motto was simple. Less res spent means more res gained. If some of his grunts got killed in the process, then the payout would be higher for the survivors. Not that any of his people ever complained. Most were regular workers who'd fallen into debt and needed an easy payout, and Xander was all too willing to accommodate their desperation into his next crew. He had a hard-on for proving that he was the most effective hunter above all else, and wanted to run the lodge for himself. It all made Leah sick. To hunt was to leave the sanctuary of pandemonium and brave the wastes of the old world. Everything was a threat out there, even other hunters, and to ignore that reality by bringing in a couple rookies still trying to relearn how to use their vocal cords was to invite disaster. And for what? A better payday? A lower risk for oneself? That wasn't the point for why they hunted. It was for the benefit of those who couldn't. It was an exercise in altruism. But then again, who was Leah to judge? If she was willing to kill off her own crew just to get in big with Hades, was she really any better than him? Less res spent means more res gained, she supposed. A fistful of sloth would be a godsend right now. Mastermind marched back, brimming with confidence. We have an update to our dilemma, Mum. It would appear that Karen had contact with our missing human. Thank goodness. Where'd Karen hole him up? Mastermind raised a finger. Unfortunately, this development has a regrettable twist. Karen chose not to detain the human, and he is now somewhere past the sticks, wandering the old city alone. What? Why the hell didn't he stop him? Karen never just let anyone waltz in and out of the sticks. It would appear that your initial bribery has boomeranged against us. Didn't need papers going in, so didn't think he needed any going out. I believe that is how he phrased the sentiment. Leah exhaled her grief. Great. So now we're a step back from square one. The last living human on the planet is out of our hands, unarmed, and trekking through the most hostile environment for his kind, alone and aimless. Perhaps he is not as aimless as you suspect, Mum. He rubbed his thumb on his lips. I would surmise that this escape was more than some impulsive spell. Based off the timing, he had gone straight from Mother's Grace to Asphodel's Gate, and not wasted a second in between. That is deliberate. The important question is what would prompt such a calculated route, and where does it end? Where, indeed? Leah needed to think, now more than ever. There was hardly a refuge for him. The nearest outpost was hundreds of miles away, and he would know no one at any. Pandemonium had its share of satellites closer, from the solar farm up north to the fisheries southwest to Watchtower downtown, but the same issues arose. Liam Fenix would find no quarter if he showed up unannounced, and that was assuming that he could find them at all. Perhaps the move was tactical. He could find some more food in a grocery market, seek higher ground, and barricade the entrance so he'd have a place to sleep. Those were all typical human things to do. Of course, that expanded the grid to just about anywhere, and made the chances of finding him even more slim than if he was laying low in pandemonium. But that would still be aimless. Food, shelter, and security were all available at Mother's Grace. He wouldn't abandon it so flippantly without a more valuable locale. But where? The sad truth was that there was no place in Reitzer world where he would have gone. No place in Reitzer world. She buried her face in her palm. Oh, fuck. I'm an idiot. B1, Chapter 12, next. 2. Armed guards marched on the rooftop of the white stone ring that surrounded the main road into the municipal district. The street had long since been cleared, the trees removed, and the windows reinforced with rebar beams. With the way that traffic was funneled into the entrance, there wasn't a single place one could stand without being the target of 3 or more snipers. There was nowhere in the world more secure than Pandemonium's central bank. I am still unsure what your goal is here, Mastermind said. What book will help to overcome our current impasse? Leah smiled below her scarf. You'll see. It wasn't every day that she beat Mastermind to a solution and got to enjoy the smugness that came with it. I could get used to this. At least let us recover our fellow compatriots before proceeding. I sent runners to find them. We've wasted enough time as is. He rolled his eyes. If you insist, Mum. A fusion of Gothic arches and modern design rose above a giant enclosure inside, pristine white like the walls around, with millions of books lining the shelves between the main room and the many adjacent storage cells. Most areas were off limits, save the entrance, and had been cordoned off with a chain link fence, capped with barbed wire. Guards patrolled the top of the aisles, reminding anyone that they were ready to execute those who attempted to steal a book. All patrons were channeled straight to the main desks, where they would try in vain to haggle their way out of getting robbed blind. Leah ignored the normal fray and went straight for the intranet stations nearby. Few places in Pandemonium had working computer networks given the high electric cost, but the bank was the exception that proved the rule. If it wasn't for the ability to search their inventory quickly, the city would collapse overnight. The routine of finding the copy she needed was all too familiar, and so she quickly navigated the site. Ha! We're in luck. Leah scribbled down the ISBN number and title. Mastermind tried to catch a glimpse of what she'd been searching, but his efforts failed as she blocked him out. This self-satisfaction was just too much fun. More than 20 minutes came and went as the pair waited in line. The usual discord of pleading, yelling, and crying grew and waned as each teller imposed the cost of exchange. There was nothing to prevent anyone from trading their book for another on the street, but because all books were different and they changed hands so frequently, it was nigh impossible to find the right one conventionally. That left most at the mercy of the central bank, which imposed exorbitant taxation to cover the exchange. Funding municipal projects was the cover story they fed to the masses, but Leah was convinced that they were just sadists. It couldn't be helped. What if someone finished a story and wanted the sequel? Only the bank was guaranteed to have it in stock. A new business opened, and the owner needed technical information? That was in the bank. A freshie looking to swap their fantasy novel for a romance? A hunter in need of a wilderness guide? A collector trying to expand? Bank, bank, bank. Next. Fran shouted. Figures I get her. Someone kill me. Of all the dreads that could be faced in this world, there was none more objectionable than going toe-to-toe with Fran, the head librarian. Rumor had it that she'd hollowed in this very library after losing both her legs, then rebuilt her rest soon after, all without ever leaving that chair. Wouldn't have surprised Leah. If there was anyone with a perpetual log up their ass, it was that miserable cunt. Leah handed over the notation she had written and went into her backpack for the books she'd brought to trade. Exchange rates were based on word count, with the standard book having 100,000 words, or the value equivalent of 100 pics. Since books had many different sizes and shapes, different brackets were created to better organize the exchange. Leah had guesstimated the copy she needed would be in the huge bracket for a city the size of Lakewood. Hugs were the most steep. Fran spent a moment typing into her workstation as she made the calculation, her wrinkled face locked in a perpetual scowl. 825 pics. Leah's eyes widened. Are you kidding me? More than 8 books for a single copy of a huge and rare, she declared without remorse. Leah wanted to puke. Leave it to her to miscalculate the added rarity surcharge. The thugs also tabulated copies they'd received to regulate how many went back into circulation, ranging from abundant to exotic. Rare was on the higher end. Now her 6 measly books weren't near enough, even with the extra pics on hand. Leah snatched her note with clenched teeth. I'll be back. Next. Fran shouted. Another hour passed before Leah could run back to the lodge, comb her own bookshelves for something she was willing to part with, and return to municipal. In the end, she was back to where she started, facing Fran yet again. How could fate be so cruel? Leah handed over the note, the 8 books she needed, and the added 25 pics, with more of both in reserve. Fran went through the same routine, typing into her computer yet again. Her face tightened an inch further. 1,500 pics. What? You told me this was 825. That was then. It's exotic now. Leah couldn't believe it. This was the ultimate scam. The injustice of a century. Fran, are you seriously trying to tell me that, in the span of an hour, someone else waltzed in here, traded for the exact same book which, for the record, nobody in existence would care about, other than me, and now there's a single copy left? Do you honestly expect me to believe that? Fran shrugged. Could have happened last night for all I know. The system just updated. Oh well. The cost is the cost. I only need it for 5 fucking minutes. There's a single line in there that matters. Don't care. Trade or leave. Mastermind tugged at her leg. Let's just get more B. But Leah wasn't having it. So help me, Fran. One of these days, I'm going to drag you into the desert, slice you open from waist to neck, and feast on your entrails. I won't let you drain either. You don't get to be that fucking lucky. I'm going to transfuse blood and grey matter directly to your brain, a year's worth for every pick you've ever made me waste, just to make sure you can't get a moment of peace as I fuck you to death, over and over for 1500 fucking years. So no deal, the bitch asked, uncaring. Fuck you. She grinned. Next. When Leah returned later, a box filled with books in her arms, and another on Mastermind's shoulders behind, she was about ready to burn pandemonium down and everyone in it. The increased line did little to placate her fury. A runner darted by, a delivery in arm. Package for Leah. Great. What now? That's me. Leah presented her identification, filled out the contract form, and tossed the runner some pics. There was a single long-range radio inside the parcel, with an attached note. Stay in touch, it read. Signed by Mother. I'll deal with this later. Whatever bullshit machinations Mother had going on, there were more pressing concerns, the primary one being to get this one fucking book without purging everyone else here. Next. Fran shouted. Just one good hit, Leah fantasized. That's all it would take, and we'd be free of her forever. She marched to the counter, threw the note in Fran's face, and poured a box filled with books, mags, and pics onto the counter. There was only the final appraisal of her own stock left. In their infinite malevolence, the bank imposed an exchange penalty for books they had in surplus, and though they offered better rates for rarer books, they seemed to always be overstocked whenever Leah traded in, and never when she traded out. It was funny how the house didn't lose in that way, if Funny had red skin and horns, anyway. The exchange was made, and Leah brooded at the sight of 2 empty boxes. A guard made the long walk into the library proper. When the treasured prize finally came her way, it couldn't have been soon enough. Leah stomped straight for the door. Mastermind trailed behind. I give up. What have you discovered? Where has our human ally gone? Leah chucked the white pages address book at his chest. He went home, genius. B1, chapter 13, Homecoming, 1. The infectious dose defines how many living viral cells are absorbed before it can reliably proliferate in the body. Even the most contagious disease will need dozens, if not hundreds of active cells to infect. And what of this HBRS 15.21? It needs no more than a single one. Dr. Ava Sherman. Geneva, Switzerland. 10 days after. We have to go back home. Liam frowned. We are home, Nellie. She shook her head. No, it's not. Not anymore. Sure, it's small, but we can make it work. Nothing a little expansion can't fix, yet. Their cabin wasn't much, but it had done the job. About 500 square feet of living space, they had enough space for everything they needed, from the bed to wood stove to kitchenette to the cabinet, all of which they had crafted by hand. They had room for clothes, tools, and a supply cache for processed food. What more could they need? Nellie said nothing, only watched Liam with those cold, blue eyes from between the tangles of blonde hair. Oh, how he loved her. Even now. Even when she was trying to force this on them. Come on, Liam said. We've talked about this before. Why would you want to go back there? It had been more than 3 years since they had finally left civilization behind and moved to the mountains of Alaska to live a naturalist lifestyle, just as the two of them had been saying since high school. It was why he had married her. Nellie crossed her arms. We don't have a choice, Liam. Don't we? Her cheeks reddened. This is our child we're talking about. What are you going to do? Have the delivery right on the bunk? Airdrop some more painkillers? We're only going to see Dale once in the next 5 months, and it'll be winter after that. What the hell are we going to do? I don't know. Liam shouted. I'll think of something. I just need more time, okay? Getting pregnant was always a reality. They were 2 grown adults with nothing but each other to keep them company as they took on the wilderness together. It was their choice, their dream, their lives. It was only natural that another life would come from that experience. And yet, this change was still unreal. When Nellie had missed her period, the two had cracked jokes. When she started to feel sick, they talked about her diet instead. Time pressed on, and for longer than he had the right, Liam deflected, even as Nellie's stomach swelled. Somewhere along the way, the truth was impossible to deny, lack of testing or not. They were going to have a child, and that was that. This isn't good enough, Nellie said. We can't just wing it. I forgot to check the snares, Liam said before crawling out of their cabin. The fresh air would be a welcome change, and he was tired of having this daily argument. God, this view would never get old. Shrubbery stretched off into the distance, their stalks a mix of bronze, gold, and emerald. Pine trees rose from their ranks, lanky and rugged like the landscape they inhabited. A sapphire slate engraved their environment where a nearby lake had formed, and off on the horizon, great grey ridges soared into the sky, their peaks flecked in white. How could they leave this? How could any human prefer a world detached from such beauty? Civilization was the antithesis of everything here. It was the ugly constructions that man threw up against the kingdom they had marred with their presence, a guileless rejection of where they had originated. To join their ranks yet again, all because they had done the very act that nature instilled in them? He'd rather die. But what choice did they have, really? Liam hated to think it. He hated to hear it. He hated to let that parasitic worm of acknowledgement get into his brain and fester, but there was no way out of it. Liam turned around. Nellie was watching from the door, the tears running down her soft cheeks. She wasn't alone. His heart was racing, and his vision was blurring. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. We have to go back, Nellie repeated. I know, he said, his throat choked. My mother was thinking of buying another house last we talked. We could take her place in Lakewood. I know she'd let us. Lakewood. Right outside Los Angeles. The epicenter of urban living, the very contradiction of their worldview. If you think that will be best, Liam said. Nellie closed in. This is going to be okay for us, right? He smiled meekly. Of course. But that was not the truth. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Home, sweet home, Liam said. Lakewood had seen better days. Like everywhere else in Los Angeles County, the buildings were aged and crumbling, the streets were cracked and filled with grass, and the cars were rusted and ruined. What had once been a grid of endless suburbia, with its well-trimmed lawns and pedicured trees, was now reduced to a web of vine-encrusted wrecks, with nature claiming dominion yet again. Liam yawned. After making his leave from that chaotic mess of a city the undead called their home, he'd found an abandoned two-story home with a king-sized bed to sleep in, miles and miles away. Though the mattress was rotted beyond recognition, it must have been the best sleep he'd had in a decade. Until morning, anyway, when the moan of a hollow outside disturbed his rest, and Liam had no choice but to leg it out of there. With a backpack of supplies and a walking stick at the ready, he made the long trek across the ruins of Los Angeles and out to Lakewood. It wasn't until late in the afternoon before he finally made it home. Haven't thought of this place as home for a while. There had been a time when he hated this building. It was right at the intersection of two busy streets, and between the nearby elementary school and the freeway, there wasn't a time of day where he couldn't hear a child screaming or car horn blaring. How Liam would have loved nothing more than to relieve those moments, as ironic as it was that he had once done everything in his power to be as far away from this place as humanly possible. He walked up the landing to the red brick veneer that led through the front door. Did I ever tell you what it was like moving in here? Liam asked, giving Thirsty a pat. Thirsty's smile beamed back. Nellie's mum had really let the place go. The shingles were worn where they hadn't fallen out, and the latches on the windows and doors were all rusted over. He gave the door a shove. It snapped open with a hiss. Just like that. Luckily, when you get used to doing all home maintenance on your own with nothing more than twigs and recycled nails, repairing a modern home in the middle of a city is an exercise in leisure. He crossed through the living room, with a layer of dust covering the couch and antiques. Of course, once the survivin' wild money started rolling in, it was all just gravy from there. Didn't have to spend any time at home. None at all. I could just buy everything, yet. He sighed. I didn't have a damn reason to be here. It was like taking a step outside time. The white plaster walls were cracked, and a film of soot covered everything in sight, but their home was otherwise untouched. The UHD television he'd bought for Nellie sat where it always had, the souvenirs he'd collected from around countries abroad stayed where they'd been, the appliances were all stationary and unused, the curtains were drawn in, and the beds were made. The kitchen was empty, and the pillows on the couch were set. Only some of their things were missing. Their prepper closet had been cleared out, and the lockbox with their old hunting rifle was now empty where it had once been dead-bolted to keep Lilith out. If any luggage had been taken, it had been small and light. Otherwise, the house was near untouched. Seems they did the smart thing and moved on, Thirsty. Liam said. Doesn't surprise me. A metropolitan location like this one is the worst place you want to be amid a pandemic. Better to find some shelter in the country where it's safe, yet. His throat cracked. I suppose we're going to have our work cut out for us. No telling just how far they've gone. Liam leaned into a wall and gasped. He wasn't sure what he'd been expecting. It wasn't like Nellie would just be waiting here with Lilith by her side, sitting in the dining room, her arms folded together, asking why he'd taken so long. He'd prepared himself for this reality over the long walk here. So why did it hurt so much? There you are. Leah yelled. B1, Chapter 13, Homecoming, 2. There you are. Leah yelled. Liam's heart skipped a beat. She stood in the door, her eyes burning in lilac fury below her scarf. She inched closer, suppressed gun gripped in gloved hands. Though not aiming at him, he had a feeling that could soon change. How'd you find me? Liam asked, unsure what else to say. He'd made certain that no one would follow him. She tossed a book on the ground. Is that the white pages? Liam Fenix, Lakewood. You're publicly listed, asshole. Liam grimaced. All he'd wanted was a little bit of peace. A little time to be alone. Don't think you're getting off this easy, Leah said. You have no idea how much of a pain in the ass that book was to get. She started to go through the living room bookshelf, examining everything in stock. She seemed more interested in how much they weighed than the contents, and quickly tossed one after the other into her backpack. What? She jibed. Did you think there'd be some red carpet here? Some bunker in the basement where they'd be hiding? They left. They did it over a decade ago, and they haven't come back. That's what everyone did when the Halloween hit. You aren't special. Liam just sat and stared. Here he was, back home after a triumphant voyage at the sea, weeks on the horizon, only to return to the very place he'd envisioned and found it destroyed. And this walking corpse was pilfering his living room while mocking him for the hope he'd given himself. Leah caught his eye and paused. The backpack fell with a slam as she walked next to him and sat by his side. Both stared into the same empty space. She sighed. Look, I get that this is all bullshit, but you have no idea the risks. A single bite and it's all over. I've seen it thousands of times before. No one survived. Trust me. Please, Liam said. Just stop. I can't. There's a hollow herd not far from here. You must have missed it, but it's migrating this way. We stay much longer and we're holed up for the night. Do you really want that? I don't want to go back. Nothing else mattered. She shook her head. I was around for the early outbreak. And I don't just mean my hollowed self. I mean me. My first memories are from the part where everyone still thought this would all die down. Some thought that I was proof they could outlast it. Maybe build an immunity or vaccine against the hollowing. But the sad reality is that the opposite came true. Their future wasn't going to be saved by me. Mine would come from them. They all died, one after the other, and I still survived. That's just how it was. How it was or is. Liam considered. Seems like everyone's in it for themselves these days. Is it really so wrong of me to want to find out what happened to my family? No, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just stupid. Why bother? You already know how it ended. Do I? Liam's eye had caught something in his peripheral, in the kitchen. He lurched to his feet and walked straight for the refrigerator. Leah started to speak, but Liam wasn't listening. He gripped a post-it note that had been stuck on the door, still clear and fresh in spite of the time. It was in Nellie's handwriting. We tried to stay here and wait for you, but there isn't any time. I'm going to a friend's cabin with Lilith. Please find us. We need you, Liam. There was an address and directions to a small town called Ponderosa, located deep in Sequoia National Park. He laughed. This was exactly what he was looking for. The time capsule he needed. The breadcrumb that would let him persevere. Of course there was still hope. Why wouldn't there be? Leah glanced at the note. This was written 12 years ago. And? You said that I'm the first living person that you've seen. Well, what's to say that there aren't more out there, but they're just in hiding. The pause she gave was all he needed. Exactly. There'd be no safer place to be than an unincorporated community at high elevation. Good natural defenses, plenty of game, low population, cold weather. Don't know how well that last bit works on you lot, but it does wonders against spoilage. Nellie is just like me. She'd know how to survive this. But Leah just furrowed her brow. You can't be serious. He shoved the note in his pocket. Tell you what. You can come with me. It'll be less than a week on foot, a couple hours if you can get one of those trucks. If I'm wrong, you'll never have to worry about me again. He swallowed the lump in his throat, remembering what Mother had said about Leah. You can do whatever you want with me after that. I won't fight. Leah watched him in silence with those demonic, magenta eyes. Whatever trepidation Liam might have about indulging this contract, there was no way out of it. He could only do so much on his own, and he suspected that getting this far without complication was more luck than skill. He needed her just as much as she needed him. Thunder roared as a gun went off. The shot was close. Come out, Leah, someone screamed from a megaphone. I know you're in there. Leah rushed to the nearest window. Her eyes bulged. What's going on? Liam asked, trying to poke past. Who's there? She removed the safety on her pistol. The devil himself. B1, Chapter 14, The Devil Himself, 1. Plead not for God's wisdom, brothers and sisters. The dead rise not because he has forsaken us. No. The dead rise because we have forsaken him. Father Elijah Campbell. Larkspur, Colorado. 20 days after. Hades beamed. How's it hanging, Leah? She stayed in the doorway, too crippled by the ambush to think of how to respond next. What? He asked. You don't look so happy right now. Cat got your tongue. Leah grit her teeth. Hades had drafted a posse of more than a dozen of his own people, pulled straight from the walls of Elysium, each brandishing military-grade rifles. His distinctive LE-MAT revolver still smoked from the warning shot he had given. Worse yet, Hades had dressed for the occasion. His casual biker get-up had been swapped for the three-piece suit with a black overcoat and pants, and vest stained in a dark maroon hue that looked like it had been coated in rotten blood. His bright scarlet eyes were barely visible below the rim of his black cowboy hat, and the spikes of his barbed leather gloves glinted in the waning light of day. This was no longer damage control. Hades hadn't worn that outfit in years, back when Reitsers were forced to scavenge the old city more regularly. They weren't facing the apathetic oligarch. Hades was here to hunt again. Do all of you undead prioritize fashion over function? Liam Fenix murmured, oblivious to the threat they now faced. Come on, Leah. Hades barked. When are you gonna introduce me to your friend? You don't need to be here, Hades, Leah said, her tone wavering. I've got everything under control. Oh? Sure as shit doesn't look that way. Seems to me that you fed me a bag of lies, and thought you could slip the rug out from under me. No, we're still good. Leah wanted to say. She'd known what she was doing, and would have brought the human in, and would have killed her people and mother and whoever else she had to. She would have done whatever it took to survive. It didn't have to go down this way. Tell you what, Leah, Hades said. You hand him over now and I'll let you walk away from this. Consider it a banishment and not an execution. He smiled. I'm sure you'll do just fine. Her veins tightened for a beat. This was the lifeline she needed. A chance to get out. If Leah had one shred of an opportunity to survive this, she had to seize the moment. Throw the human to the wolves and fight for another day. There was no other choice here. She had to surrender to this insurmountable force. Please, Liam pleaded. Don't do this. As Leah looked to Liam Fenix by her side, with his flushed face, she thought again of her conversation with Mother. What was going through his living, human mind? What thoughts plagued him now? What emotions was he experiencing? Leah had never felt those ineffable expressions. She had never had parents or children or been married. No future, no past, no lineage, no life. Her story was that of herself and nothing more, and no matter how long she survived, that would not change so long as she was trapped in the dead husk of an undead body. Hades yawned. Don't have all day. We doing this, or is it murdering time? Leah did not want to die, but she also craved life. She groaned. Shit. Leah drew her 1911 and fired. The .45 ACP round whizzed over Hades's head as he lurched to the ground. You fucking see you. But Leah kept shooting. The two closest mercs dropped while they fumbled with their weapons. Before she could get the killing blow on Hades, he scrambled behind a nearby car. She popped a third gunner as he took aim. The return fire hit like a torrent, but Leah threw herself and Liam Fenix behind the brick facade before it could land. She leaned back into the open and emptied her magazine, then scrambled for the nearest couch. Stay down. Leah ordered. She quickly removed her suppressor and rammed a mag of soft point cartridges in place. It would be a nightmare to kill any of them, but an open-tipped lead bullet lodged into undead flesh could practically take out a limb the moment it mushroomed out. More bullets rocketed throughout the house, shattering the windows and exploding the wall. Hades's troops moved to flank as Leah tried to bog them down. The act was futile. She managed to take out half of one guy's chest with a pair of shots, and disintegrated the hand of another entirely, but landing a headshot on moving targets was difficult enough on its own. Doing so when they shot back and from cover was nigh impossible. Leah caught sight of the backpack filled with books she had swiped. It was mere feet away, but with all the firepower in the air, it might have been miles. She cursed herself, knowing that this bounty would have to be left behind. Leah grunted. Fall back. The two retreated into the kitchen. Liam Fenix thrust the refrigerator onto the ground as makeshift cover, and Leah went to secure the back door. Another barrage hit before she could plot an escape route. Damn it, there's too many. Leah had chosen poorly. This exercise was hopeless, and she was going to die, all because she had clung to this fantasy of life. Suddenly, a high-caliber round tore through one of the soldiers' heads. Before her nearby friend could respond, Kurt rushed into view and drove his sledgehammer down. Ichor exploded out and the merc went limp. Leah grinned. Run. The pair rushed into the street and around a corner. Gunshots hissed through the air, but Buttercup was on a nearby roof laying into them with his Dragunov, and they could find little purchase against his storm. Mastermind popped out from a fence door and fired a volley from his suppressed MP5. Over here, Mum. They dove behind a garage, out of immediate danger. Mastermind handed over the M16 that Leah preferred for this kind of engagement. She'd nabbed it from the corpse of a soldier over a decade ago, and had to have swapped out every part a dozen times by now, always aiming for a more perfect instrument of death. The odds were now back in her favor. A hunter was only ever as powerful as her tools. Thought I told you I'd take care of this on my own, Leah said as she loaded a fresh magazine, this one filled with jacketed hollow points that'd give her shots a little more kick. Mastermind grinned. Evidently, your instincts have led you astray. Hades must have had you followed because once I'd located Kurt and Buttercup, he had already rallied a detachment in pursuit. We're lucky to have reached you now. Our timing could not have been more auspicious. She laid down some suppressing fire of her own, peppering those bold enough to try for an advance. The mercs scattered anew. You can say that again. Kurt made his way to them and lurched behind the wall. What's the play here, boss? These guys won't stay spooked for long. Only use JHPs for ammo from here on out, she ordered. We're not trying to kill them, only keep them where they are. Burn every mag if you have to. Trust me, this isn't a fight they'll want dragged out. She yelled to Buttercup and conveyed the same information by hand. What about me? Liam Fenix asked. She shoved him down another inch. Stay where you are and let us handle this. The battle raged for minutes as Leah and her crew forced Hades into a stalemate. The street was mostly clear of debris from their vantage, forcing their enemies to storm a killing field if they wanted to advance. Hades roared through his megaphone, talking all the shit he could in an attempt to rally his forces. An occasional patter of blood burst free as each side took hits, but no one else was able to land a killing blow. A door shattered open to Hades's flank and a hollow wandered into the open. Another came seconds after, and then another after that. Within moments, dozens began to file down the street, drawn by the gunfire. Heard, one of the mercs shouted. Leah laughed. Got them. The hollows flocked their enemies like locusts. Hades and his troops were forced to burn ammunition, and with the weight of the hollows' numbers pressing on their ranks, their position had been exposed. First one of his mercs dropped when he rushed out of cover, and then another. The threat would be minimal for seasoned hunters, but these were Elysium guards. They were used to beating a worker who'd overstayed his welcome, and not challenging a herd head-on. Only Hades remained undeterred, and directed his wrath to their new enemy, slicing this way and that with his bolo machete as he organized his soldiers to stay in line. But it was not enough. The hollows had surrounded them, and soon, they were lost in a sea of desiccated corpses. Leah met Hades in the eye, in spite of the distance. He watched her, incredulous that the odds had tilted so far against him. This was the ultimate humiliation. The greatest insult he'd ever suffered. Nobody defeated him. Leah flashed the two-fingered peace sign and made her escape. B1, Chapter 14, The Devil Himself, 2. Buttercup paced back and forth, his hands in his hair. Oh man, oh man. I can't believe we did that. We're fucked. Calm down, Leah said. We've lost them for now. Yet. Emphasis on now. What the hell are we going to do when he catches back up? What do you think? Leah could have said. Keep shooting and hope he drops before we do. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Liam Fenix gasped for air from the shelf he had floundered onto. I'm gonna need a breather. You all might be in good shape, but I'm not exactly built to run a marathon like this. Kurt massaged a wound in his knee. I could use a break too. Leg's not working right. I think the bone might have been chipped. Come on, Leah said. We've barely been moving an hour. Give it a couple more before we start hunkering down. She looked around the office building they had taken as a refuge. The windows had been boarded up and the parking lot was clear of blind spots, but they were far from secure, should anything greater than small arms fire come their way. The added height gave them miles of vision, at least. Our companions do raise a fair point, Mastermind said. Hades will require some time to rally reinforcements, and even the best hunters wouldn't be able to track our path before tomorrow. We should use this opportunity to strategize a more effective response. What do you suggest then? Leah asked. Pandemonium's burned. There's no going back anytime soon. No thanks to you. Buttercup shouted. She narrowed her gaze. What did you just say? You're the one who dragged us into this mess, and you're the one who's only made it worse. Why should we care what Hades does to a human? Liam Fenix stirred. You know I'm right, H. Where would you be without me, Buttercup? Leah snapped. Still cleaning streets? Maybe slinging cards at Elysium? Let's not forget that you came to me. I'm sorry that you're in over your head, but I won't take shit from anyone just because they thought we were getting easy picks. But he did not back down. Don't act all high and mighty just because you're too proud to admit you fucked up. We're all going to die, and that's on you. Leah couldn't believe it. It wasn't the insubordination that insulted her half as much as his sheer arrogance. Did he have any clue how high the stakes had been? She pointed to the door. Tell you what, Buttercup. Why not try your luck on your own? I won't stop you. He grit his teeth. Come on, you know I can't just do that. Oh, so now you need me again. Fucking great. Maybe instead of bitching about shit we can't change, you can shut the fuck up and let me deal with it, just like I always do for you. Buttercup stormed off with a scoff. Of course he'd be the first to crack. He was the youngest member of her crew, and Leah was never quite sure how she felt about him. The extra wealth might have turned him into a rebellious ass, but hunting had also instilled a level of boldness he deserved to have. But damn, did it piss her off sometimes. Younger Reitzers only knew the world for what it was, not how it'd been. They had no idea how quickly it could all go to shit, or what the old guard had done to make the city stable to begin with. And to think that he had the temerity to challenge her? Did he not know how impossible her day had become the moment this gold mine landed in her lap? How Leah wanted nothing more than to kill all the dead weight and shoulder this burden alone, just like she once had. Her radio crackled. Leah wouldn't have noticed at all had it not been attached to the inside of her sheepskin jacket. Everyone fell silent as she held the radio up. I'm glad you chose hope, Mother said from the other end. Doesn't quite feel that way, Leah responded. We could really use some of your people right now. I'm not in the hospital, and I won't be back there for a very long time. We have more important work to get done. Leah didn't like her tone. It was the type that someone used before saying I told you so and giving a smug grin. Why don't we meet up then? Can't say I like talking to you through an unsecured line. There's no time. Forces are moving against our future. The apocalypse will soon hit its crest, and humanity will be no more. What was started 12 years ago must be put to rest. It's the only chance this world has. She sighed. Stop speaking in riddles, Mother. If you've got a plan, I'm all ears. I'm telling you the plan, you're just not listening. In order to save tomorrow, we have to return to yesterday. Do you remember where you started, Leah? Has your reservoir held strong enough, all these long years later? She weighed the thought. Yes. Good. Mine has as well. That's our advantage here. Hades doesn't care about where we were or where we're going. History is immaterial to the man who lives only in the present. That is why I'm asking you to bring Liam to the one place that he won't know to follow, your own past. Relieve that story, and I will provide you with another. What game is this? Leah knew exactly where she wanted them to go. Seems kind of far to travel for a meet, especially with the added baggage. And it will be longer still before we are done. You have to trust me. She paused. Just as you once had. Evading Hades while in the ruins of Metropolis was one feat, but traversing the country with his soldiers at their heels was another. This was a risky journey with a slim chance on the best of conditions, and would be even more unimaginable when dragging a living human across such inhospitable terrain. And yet, Mother was calculating beyond measure. She would not make such a request unless there was no alternative. I suppose you've got us over a barrel this time, Mother. You want my trust for now? You've got it. Leah glared at the radio, as if to will her low through. But don't you dare make me regret this. I've fought too long just to die over your bullshit. I understand, she said. My time is up. Don't lose yourself, Leah. It's all that keeps you whole. A distant growl ruptured the stillness of the room as a cluster of motorcycles echoed from afar. Leah rushed to the window and caught sight of them flying across the highway. Details fell into focus as she narrowed in with her binoculars, making out the white lab coat and feminine frame of Mother soaring across the barren highway. A troop of her elite guard rode behind, with their green scrubs and AK-47s. All flew due north, where Leah and the others would soon be heading. Just another fucking day in paradise, hey? She thought. What the hell just happened? Buttercup asked. I guess you could say we got ourselves a contract, Leah considered. We're going on a road trip. How far are we talking? Far enough to retrace 12 years of history and go to the place where I first hollowed. She sighed. We're going to Reno. His eyes widened. Are you serious? Got any better ideas? He fell mum. Liam Fenix took a step forth. Hold on a second. If we're going there, we'd have to cross through Sequoia, am I right? So. He grinned. That's where my wife and daughter went, remember? We'd be right on the way. Not this shit again. Leah put her face in her palm. I told you, it's been 12 years. She's gone. Seems to me like we're both trying to do the same thing. You have your history to track, and I have mine. Work with me on this one, yet. No wonder Mother had pushed that angle so hard. She must have been speaking to both of them, and not just her. That's what you get for giving her an inch. Leave it to Mother to always have some hidden card under the table. There would be no way to keep the fantasy out of his head now, and if Leah wanted any hope of keeping him compliant, she'd have to capitulate to his demand. Fine, she said. We'll visit your town on the way. Just don't do anything stupid. He nodded. Of course. This won't be my first hike in the mountains. It's settled then. She turned to the others, and Buttercup in particular. Unless anyone has any objections. They stayed silent. Great. Patch yourselves up, pack your shit, and get ready to roll. We don't stop until I say. Got it. You won't regret this, Liam Fenix said. She already did. B1, Chapter 15, Trek in the Woods, 1. The infected will rot away, sooner or later. Not in our lifetime. The degradation you're witnessing is only skin deep. Their tissue is hostile to most natural microorganisms. For all intents and purposes, the infected aren't just dead. They're also embalmed. Dr. Ava Sherman. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. 2 months after. It was all like riding a bicycle. That's what wilderness trekking was for the veteran survivalist. Liam had done more hikes and conquered more mountains than he could count. His legs might have been sorer now that he was in his 40s, and his willpower more drained, but a couple of days breathing mountain air and supplementing his diet with fresh fruit and their extra vitamins, and he had never felt half as invigorated. The arid wastelands of Los Angeles had first given way to the dry foothills that pocketed the plateau. There, the temperature leveled out and clusters of trees became regularities. Slowly but surely, the wind-swept brush submitted to a more lush mosaic. California walnuts and white firs overtook the dried yuccas beneath, and the flow of water was never far from the ear. Somewhere along the way, they could find easy refuge from the overbearing sun. But the travel was slow going. Leah had insisted on keeping off any roads that transcended the slopes for fear that they'd be seen, and then had gone the extra length to avoid the valleys beneath. Hollows had a habit of congregating there, she claimed, though Liam had his skepticism. Not many had crossed their path once they had broken free from the city, and fewer still wandered into the open after a few days of traversing the land. Their path ultimately led them to zigzag through the mountains, circumventing Lancaster altogether as they pushed north. His companions seemed to be weathering the journey with flying colors, at least. The Reitzers kept watch when Liam went to sleep, and always seemed to have woken up well before dawn. They never stopped to rest unless he asked for it, and they seemed to ignore the rapid changes in temperature altogether, in spite of wearing 3 layers of clothes at any given time. Even their injuries didn't affect their pace. Within days of the firefight, they had all recovered as though nothing had ever happened. Liam floundered onto the latest ridge. Never thought I'd be the one to slow them down, he said to Thirsty before giving him a tap. The Life is Good label was almost mocking under the hot sun. Kurt took a step back and gave Liam a lift with his hefty, gloved hand. All things considered, I think you're doing pretty good. Most Reitzers don't do so great in the wilderness, and we're more durable than you lifers. Liam let out a breath. You don't get it. I've been out here like this for most of my life. If it wasn't hunting with my father back in England, then it was the weeks I'd spent camping with Nellie after my family moved to the States. We were living just outside the Adirondacks at the time, and she was only my high school sweetheart. Then we were truly alone in Alaska after that. We didn't even have a refrigerator. Instead, we'd take chunks of meat and shove them on a pole to keep away from scavengers. Very old technique, first used by ancient Inuit, I believe. Anyway, even when we went back to California after Lilith was born, I got myself a job taking stock photos of the mountains for this advertising firm. Thought my adventuring days were done then, but fate had other plans. He smiled. One of the executives heard I liked camping, and starting asking about my experience. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was the lead star in a documentary series about wilderness survival. That's how much I've been doing this. They made a show about surviving. Kurt asked. Sounds stupid. Everyone who isn't dead is surviving. You, me, them. There's no exception. So why make an entire show about it? You might as well just watch paint dry. Liam smiled. Ah, but this is different, mate. It's one thing to survive in the middle of a city with all the amenities, but when you're a naturalist, all you have to work with is that which you can find out here. Kurt raised his sole eyebrow. So you're saying they made a TV show based on what we're doing right now? I suppose, in a sense, yes. So it goes then. That's terrible story construction. Now Liam was starting to get offended. You're telling me that wilderness survival isn't the least bit intriguing to you? Exploring some rugged landscape, untouched by man. Fighting off predators both large and small. Scavenging everything from the exotic to the grotesque, all to survive. None of that sounds like a compelling story to you. He kept walking. You don't get it. This is the boring part of any story. That's why they always skip over it, or just use the space for bullshit dialogue. Nobody cares about how some jackass got from one part of the woods to another. You know he'll get to the other side. Talking about it is just a waste of time. Well, I'll have you know that wasting time got me 7 figures and millions of people tuning in. Every week we ran, for more than 70 episodes across 4 seasons. Would have had a 5th had things turned out different. I hear the living used to make shows about rich women bitching at each other, and a lot of people watched them. Doesn't mean they were good. Liam couldn't believe what he was hearing, especially from Frankenstein's monster reborn. You know what your problem is, Kurt? You're not looking at the trees for the forest it created. What made Survive in Wild so successful wasn't the plot, but the presentation. I'd do the things the other guys wouldn't. Maybe I'd jump in quicksand, or squeeze water from dung. The people loved watching the spectacular unfold, and wouldn't shy away when I'd impart the valuable lessons they needed, should they find themselves in a similar predicament. My foreign accent helped to keep them interested, but mostly, it was my showmanship and experience that kept people tuned in. That let me do what I wanted most, which was to share my knowledge. Me and Nellie learned a lot living as naturalists, you see. More than I could ever explain in a lifetime. But if I could use the telly to distribute even a fraction of what I had gained, I could make people's lives better. Sure, journeying for free to romantic lands was fun, but it wasn't half as fulfilling as knowing that I was making a difference. It was all about helping people to learn to survive. Kurt grinned. It wasn't his best look. Should have made an episode on the Halloween then. I'd bet a lot of people would have appreciated that. Liam rolled his eyes. Oh, you can just bugger off. With another huff, he rounded the next bend. They were still several hundred meters from the others. Well, I've shared my story to you, mate. Why not waste my time with yours? Not much to tell. I made my way to Pandemonium after hearing the rumors like everyone else, and then did construction for a couple months. Work sucked. The city needs renovations left and right, but they never pay enough to keep you thinking. Thought I'd re-hollow there. He gazed ahead. Until I met Leah. She said I didn't have to be a useless meathead. Said I could make something of myself. Didn't believe her at first. Felt like I'd just screw things up. But then I got my hands on a couple books. Learned a lot. Got smarter. Built a stronger res. Suddenly, I was more than the mindless Hulk that everyone said I was. He paused. I owe everything I have to her. Liam watched Leah. She was miles ahead of the rest of them, scouting for a path forward while scanning behind for threats. He supposed that Kurt wasn't the only one to owe her his life. B1, Chapter 15, Trek in the Woods, 2. Twilight tore through the pines of a cloudless night, and Liam trekked between the trees. He hadn't been having the best of sleep, and the sound of a nearby waterfall had wet his tongue. How desperately he could use some fresh mountain water right about now. Liam entered a clearing, and his heart skipped a beat. Pale skin glowed like white gold in the moonlight. Ebony hair fell in waves past shoulders. The water from the fall flowed over a specter in the shape of a woman, buttocks out and breasts free as he faced her back. Liam was mesmerized by the illusion. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen a naked woman, and his body responded at once. There was nothing else to think, nor any ramifications to consider. There was only him and this seductive siren. Then Leah glanced his way, scarf still wrapped around face, and Liam reflexively averted his gaze. She's a goddamn corpse, you fucking nutter. Too much time stranded had driven him mad. Moments later and she wandered over, her body once again hidden beneath a sheepskin jacket and jeans. You should keep resting, Liam Fenix. Why did she always use his last name? It was so goddamned impersonal. I could use a drink. He held up Thirsty, whose smile seemed to nod in agreement. I told you before, everything needs to be boiled first. We can't risk you getting sick. That's fair, but the way I figure it, we're out here alone, and most dangerous microbes only grow in still water. I'll be fine. You're forgetting about the Halloween. Relax. How long have we been together now? I'm sure if the disease was as contagious as you're making it out to be, I'd have gotten it by now, yet. Her violet eyes burned deep. That isn't how it works. The Halloween follows its own rules. She walked over to the waterfall and held out her hand. Water streamed over her bony fingers. There are 2 types of strains. The hard strain and the soft strain. Hard cells are pseudocells that have fully formed. They behave like blood cells, or muscles, or neurons, or whatever else is needed. Once the Halloween becomes hard, it can't be anything different, and therefore can't reproduce. You could hold my hand or wear my clothes, and wouldn't become infected. She flipped over her hand, and water became trapped in the palm. Then there's the soft strain. These are the pseudo-cells that don't know what they'll become yet, so they just pull nutrients from the first cell they see and start replicating. That's what made the hollowing spread so fast. A single soft cell in the body, and you're hollow within hours. No exceptions. Worse yet, an infected but living human became the most dangerous vector because everything from their blood to their sweat could transfer it to someone else, and they wouldn't even know. The hard strain might have created hollows, but it was the soft that let them burn your world down. In spite of the time, there are some parts of the body that will always be infused with soft cells. Saliva is the biggest contributor. A single bite from anyone, including me, and it's over. Tears will also contain it though, along with the digestive and urinary tract. She took a step closer. That's why I can't risk you drinking water that hasn't been purified. Even if a hollow pissed in the river miles upstream, you'll still die. Liam gulped against the severity of the claim. At least whatever arousal he'd felt just moments ago was now extinguished. Hearing about zombie urinary tracts turned out to be quite the turn-off. Twigs snapped nearby, and Liam instinctively withdrew a few steps. Leah held up her hand. Don't worry, it's Buttercup. How can you tell? The forest was pitch black. Our adaptation is better than yours. This many hours after the sun's down, our night vision is almost as good as what we can see during the day. He squinted. Really? Leah shrugged. Just don't shine a light in our faces. The rapid change in stimulus is like a flashbang to us. Then Buttercup strolled into view with a dead bobcat strung over a shoulder, and his rifle over the other. Look what I found out there. We're gonna be eating well tonight. He grinned when he noticed Liam. Oh, I see our friend decided he's sick of laying around all the time. Liam salivated at the sight. How long had it been since he'd eaten meat not stuck in a can? Don't suppose I could have some of that. Buttercup grinned. Well, well. I see we're starting to rub off on you after all. Leah held out her palm. No. Can't risk it. Relax, he said with a yawn. I cleaned my bullets before I used them, and haven't touched the corpse without gloves. No contamination here. Come on, Liam said. I know how to properly prepare meat. Just give me a little space, yet. Leah sighed. Fine. But if I can see the fire from more than 20 paces away, I'm putting it out. Thank you. They returned to camp, and Liam went to work cleaning the corpse while Leah located the others. He sliced into the abdomen using the practiced efficiency that he'd cultivated over the years, and quickly gutted the bobcat, one organ after another. Then he laid it out on rock and peeled away the hide, being sure to keep dirt away from the meat. He reached the final step of butchering the flesh for cooking when the others returned. We're in luck, Liam said. There's a good 10 pounds of meat here. Where's the intestines? Kurt asked. Over there. He gestured over his shoulder. Kurt grunted as he picked the discarded organs off the ground. Ah, you ruined them. He brushed off some dirt and started munching. Right. Forgot they eat anything they can. Buttercup yanked a severed leg out of his hands and took a bite. Gotta say, Liam, you're quite the gourmet. Liam frowned. Was hoping to cook that first. He spat. Blat. Nothing tastes worse than cooked meat. You have no idea what you're missing out on. Buttercup, you ignominious mongrel. Mastermind roared. You mutilated the most crucial delicacy. Yeah, sorry about that. Meant to shoot its chest, but the wind picked up. Now how are we to persevere? The scalp has been ruined. What's he talking about? Liam asked. He'd made sure to dress everything important. Buttercup twitched. The brain. Can't be a proper meal if you miss out on the brains. Of course. What are you zombies without your brains? Hey now, don't say that. Zombie is like the N-word to our kind. Liam chuckled. I don't quite think it is, mate. Maybe not, but it's close enough. He cut off a chunk of bloody stomach and popped it in his mouth. You enjoy eating charred ash. I'll stick with the good stuff. The group ate and laughed from there, enjoying the merriment of this rare lull among themselves. Reetzers apparently had to eat like anything else, lest their bodies fail on them and they go hollow. Liam supposed that it made sense. The laws of physics had to be obeyed, undead or not, though it seemed that they could go longer and eat less than their living counterparts. This was the first meal for them in days, and none seemed too bothered. Even Leah hung around, and for a moment, Liam was certain she'd remove her scarf to eat, but then the two made eye contact, and she wandered away with her meal, alone. It truly was a shame. She no doubt had some nasty scar she not wish for him see, but Liam was the last to judge. Drinking water from dung lowers the bar on what's unpleasant, my dear. This was turning into quite the feast. For all their differences, the undead had much more in commonality with him than he would have suspected. They ate, they laughed, they shit, and if circumstances became grim enough, they died, with no more revelry to experience. Death was the purest link that brought them together, but where Liam would grow wiser and body weaker until its final stroke hit, Reetzers remained stagnant in their frames, and only their minds would ever decay. Was this the true nature of the hollowing? Was it no more than the mirror image of life itself? The more they talked, the more resolved Liam became in his own convictions. His companions were not opposed to humanity, but a reflection. They were no more than the inverse of all that had come before, and not an enemy to it. If their kind was the dominant species of this world, then there was hope yet. For Liam as well as his family. B1, Chapter 16, Food is food. 1. An interesting development. Though the 15th generation of the HBRS trials have propelled our research into a new frontier, subjects are still incapable of producing ADP, or reconnecting synapses on their own. Perhaps both could be gained from an external source. Dr. Ava Sherman. Manchester, New Hampshire, 6 months before. It's good to see you, Nellie. Wish I could say the same, she said between stuttered frames. We can't get video here. Liam sighed. Well, I can see you, so I suppose that'll have to do for now, yet? I'll be sure to let Carlos know later that his feed is trash. How's Zambia? You'd love it. Lots of history, lots of culture. Our local contact is from the Bimba tribe. He's been teaching me a lot of material to use for the show. We'll have to visit here again sometime. She smiled. I'd like that. It just feels like th. The feed died. Liam groaned and gave the laptop a smack. Come on, you bloody wanker. Bring her back. He whacked it again. One condition. That's all I'd asked. Was that so hard? Liam hadn't agreed to fly internationally until the producers had promised that he'd be able to speak to his family both directly before and after the show was filmed. This was the first real episode of Survivin' Wild after the pilot had knocked its ratings expectations out of the park, and they could afford to bring him out here. Leave it to television producers to give him assurances when they lacked the right. Ear me. Nellie suddenly said, and the screen jumped back into focus. Liam grinned. Ha. Yes, I'm here, Nellie. Can you hear me? Yes, Liam. I can hear you. I'm sorry, love, but I missed a good chunk of that. She sighed. When are you coming home? Just 5 days to complete the episode, and then the flight back. Less than a week. I don't just mean this episode, honey. How many more of these are they going to make you do? Liam grimaced. It's a bit tough to say. Her eyes narrowed on the screen, and for a moment, he swore she had made eye contact, even with her own service down. You're lying, Liam. How many episodes are they going to make you do? He paused. The truth was going to hurt, and he'd done well to shield her from it until now, but there was no way to keep the charade going anymore. 19 episodes total, he said. Spread over the next 8 months. Won't be home for more than a few days at a time. She frowned. Liam. He leaned in. It's not all bad news, yet. If this thing takes off like they're saying, we're going to be looking at real money. The kind that'll let me retire at 30. Lilith needs you now. She needs to see her father. Well, I can't do anything for her on 30 grand a year, now can I? Nellie opened her mouth to speak, but the words grew jumbled, and the screen locked again. Oh, for fuck's sake. Liam roared before giving the laptop a shake. Why couldn't Nellie just throw him a bone on this one? If anything, he'd be able to see her more often now, what with no longer needing to hitchhike into the middle of nowhere to get that perfect panoramic shot. It wasn't on him that they were forced into the complexities of civilization. If only Liam had had his way, they'd still be perfectly happy in Alaska. The worst part was the expression on Nellie's face, locked on the screen where it had cut out. Her blue eyes were soft and sad, and the light had been extinguished. It wasn't the sorrow that bothered him half as much as the resignation, as though she didn't believe a word he said. Liam was only trying his bloody best. To go, Nellie said, her face still locked in place. I'm here, I'm here. Liam shouted. She paused. I can hear you. Look, Nellie. I'm sorry that this is a bit shit. I'm sorry that I can't be there right now. I'm sorry that this is going to take more time than I thought. I promise to do everything in my power to make it up to you both. The video feed snapped back to the present, and Nellie looked more defeated than angry. Okay. You do you. He tapped his hands on the keyboard's rim, feeling the tension brewing thousands of miles away. We're still good, right? Again, she looked directly into the screen. We are if you'll just be honest. Tell me that you aren't doing this because you'd rather be out there than here. There it was. The truth evoked. Liam paused, with no words to share out loud. I'd rather you be here with me. He gave the screen a shake. Gah. You're cutting out again, Nellie. Bugger this. We'll try again later. He disconnected the call. Liam didn't want to go back to California. He hated the city. He hated the noise. He hated the smell of asphalt and gasoline and smog. This was where he belonged, out in the wilds surviving against all it had to offer. But in doing so, he'd sacrificed the only other thing he truly loved. Nellie would never agree to leave with him. Not while Lilith still needed care. Liam loved his daughter, of course he did. But she was tethered to the very place he wanted to leave, and there was no feasible way to bring her with him. And with Nellie trapped behind too, what was a man to do, but try his best to live in both worlds? He'd find a way to make this work. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. There it was. The sign he'd been looking for. The resolution that Liam craved. Ponderosa it read, Pop 64 LF 7200. The place where his family had fled. The green paint was faded and the metal rusted where it had collapsed into a nearby tree, but there was no denying the words. He peered down the street and could just make out the shape of buildings through the pines. Told you this was the right road, Liam said. Thank goodness he'd talked them into taking this fork after they'd cleared Bakersfield. Leah furrowed her brow. Stay close. She turned to the others. Hand signals from here on out. We don't know what we're walking into. The group split off into the forest, using a thicket of pines to mask their approach, their rifles drawn. Liam would never understand how they managed to carry so many. Kurt seemed to have half a dozen in his rucksack at any given time, and that wasn't counting the gear his allies had for themselves. Liam wiped the sweat from his brow. Exhaustion had been hitting him harder the past few days. There was only so much to be done about it. He'd gone from a sparse diet of dehydrated fruit and fish to fresh berries and meat in less than a week, and his body hadn't been above sea level in over a decade. Reacclimating himself to this environment would always have taken its toll, even without also running for his life from a group of undead killers, or following the pace of his more athletic companions. But now that Ponderosa sat in sight, his adrenaline pumped anew, extinguishing his fatigue. His family was so close. He could feel it. They marched into the open. His chest tightened. A single building lay ahead, a mix of redwood log cabin and contiguous shopping plaza. A general store and coffee shop could be seen, but the last sign had collapsed into the building it rested on. The windows were boarded and spikes poked from the walls, but whatever defenses that had been laid were long since neglected. Leah flashed some signals to Kurt and Mastermind. The two split up and approached the structure from each flank, guns at the ready. A few moments later, they gave the thumbs up. "We're clear," Leah said, lowering her own rifle. "Buttercup, I want eyes on that roof." He tapped his fedora. "You got it, boss." "Could be they hold up further in town," Liam suggested. "Could be," she said with a tone that suggested anything but that. They closed into the buildings, with the Reitzers leading the charge. The defenses were quick to dismantle, and the floors cleared, and it wasn't long until Liam was allowed to enter with them. He coughed back the miasma of rot as he entered the general store. The register was cracked and dusty, the contents of the shelves were buried under a layer of cobwebs, and the redwood floor creaked with each step. A swarm of mosquitoes burst into flight, revealing a dead possum curled in a corner. At least he'd identified the source of the smell. The Reitzers tore through the shelves, throwing old cans about. Liam kicked one of the cans aside. "Last I checked, I'm the only one that can eat anything here." "Well, except for our possum friend over there." "Too old," Kurt said. "It'll have lost all nutrition by now." "What could you possibly be looking for then?" "The usual," Buttercup said. "Weapons, ammo, batteries. Not everything is about filling your stomach, Liam. Sometimes, you've just gotta shoot some asshole in the face." He shrugged. "Fair enough, mate. We'll go door to door," Leah decided. From the look of things, these people did better than most. There's no telling what they left behind. Liam grimaced. It was far from a foregone conclusion, but he knew that if he said that out loud, they'd only treat him with that same condescending look. "Let's move," Leah said. The group marched deeper into the town, though that was a generous term for the place. There wasn't much in the name of infrastructure, as this community appeared to have been based on its camping economy. Vacation homes pocketed the streets, perverted over time by decay. Their designs blended between the quaint and the luxurious, with some cabins stretching over 3 stories tall, while others looked little better than Liam's old hovel in Alaska. Almost all of the windows were boarded and doors reinforced, but no matter how far they went through, there seemed to be no signs of life. Leah froze and held up her fist. The others quieted. For a moment, all seemed clear, but then groans rolled through the trees, coming their way. "We've got hollows." B1, Chapter 16, Food is Food, 2. "We've got hollows," Leah said. "Kurt, you stay near Liam. Don't let anything get close." The dead marched into sight, arms raised and mouths salivating. Their clothes were disintegrated beyond recognition, and their peeled, grayish skin glinted in the sunlight. The eyes were white and empty, and their teeth clattered without thought. Liam gulped as the monsters lumbered straight for him. This wasn't the first time they'd come across a group of hollows, but this might have been the largest in such a tight space, with at least 50 in their ranks. How the hell were they going to deal with this? Quickly and efficiently, as it were. Leah moved straight through the center of the mass, swinging her knife this way and that with practiced elegance. Bodies piled wherever she moved. Buttercup followed in her wake, using a sickle to lop off the heads of those she missed. Even Mastermind had no issues murdering their enemies, in spite of his tiny form. He would strike between the legs of the larger ones to throw them off balance, then drive his bowie into the back of their skulls as they floundered on the ground. No wonder they call themselves hunters. This was nothing short of a massacre, and within moments of fighting, the hollows had all been killed. Save for one. Where all of the other buggers had wandered straight into the meat grinder, a lone hollow suddenly turned on its heels and began to shuffle away. Leah's eyes narrowed on the deserter. "Buttercup, you're up." On it. In a flash, he had his Dragunov drawn and ready to go. A pair of pings rocked the stillness of the forest, and the hollow collapsed as rounds obliterated the muscles in its knees. Buttercup jogged over and lassoed his belt around its neck. The others closed in. He grinned. "Think we've got a good catch here." The hollow thrashed. "No wonder they were so clustered," Leah said. "Looks like we found the general to their army." She leaned in. "You understand me, don't you?" The hollow made eye contact and fell silent. "What's going on?" Liam asked. He hadn't seen any of them behave like this before. "I thought you said that hollows weren't intelligent." "This one's not a hollow. Check the eyes." Between the discoloration on its brow and a giant bite mark on the cheek, Liam hadn't noticed at first, but the eyes had a dull, crimson tint. It was far from the vivid strength of his companion's pupils, but now that he was close enough, he noticed the distinction compared to the white emptiness of the dead nearby. Becoming a reader isn't easy, Leah explained. Not everyone builds a strong enough reservoir to use their language skills again, or form complex thoughts. We call the ones in the middle dregs. Not empty, but not full either. The more clever fuckers get good at rallying herds to stalk prey for them, like this guy here. The dreg hissed. Leah nodded, and Kurt threw a bag over the dreg's head. It flailed in retaliation, but trapped between the arms of a creature more than twice its size, there was little that could be done. Kurt marched it to the nearest cabin, with Buttercup walking in tow, sickle in hand. What are you going to do with him? Liam dared to ask. She watched the door. What was it you said before? What are you zombies without your brains? His eyes widened. You're going to eat him. Don't look so surprised. The Hallowing doesn't wait around or care about your morals. Our minds are still dying, and our brains can't produce the grey matter we lose. We have to replace it with another source. She pushed her scarf up an inch. If someone who's already half-hollowed did the work for us, then our day's been made a hell of a lot easier. Liam pointed to the pile of dead hollows. Couldn't you at least use one of them? There's got to be a better way. Hollows haven't developed the right types of cells. That's what makes them hollow. Eating them would be like drinking water. No nutrients, no enzymes. Just empty space. Can't keep a res full on that. But this is cannibalism. No, it's survival. We aren't in pandemonium anymore. Out here, food is food. It doesn't matter where it comes from, only that it works. Don't like it, and you can wait out here. She turned to Mastermind. Keep an eye on him, will you? He grinned. You got it, Mum. Leah marched into the cabin to commit her monstrous deed, while Liam followed her advice of staying put. The agonizing howl of their captured dreg hit its climax before abruptly ending. Liam stared at the cabin door and felt sick. Mastermind beamed at his side, his innocent and childlike grin undermined by the gruesome gash that poked out from his neck, and skin that was definitely more wrinkled than when they'd first met. As Liam resisted the urge to vomit, Mastermind gave him a silent thumbs up. God, this world was a wretched place. Liam needed a distraction. So here's what I don't understand. If hollows know nothing other than hunger, then why don't they just eat each other? Tainted flesh isn't compatible with our digestive system, Mastermind explained. While a brimming brain can be consumed to great benefit, the same cannot be said for our corrupted vessels. Hollowed meat tastes like ash and gets absorbed like dirt. I guess that begs another question then. Why do hollows try to eat you if there's no point? They operate on instinct. He ran a thumb along his chin. Think of them as if they were sharks. When a shark sees a pair of feet dangling above, they know not that the swimmer attached will be an ill-suited additive to their culinary palate. They bite because they mistake the swimmer for their true prey. Hollows are much the same. If we walk, talk, and behave like a living human, they conclude that we must be one, and therefore regard us as such. Liam nodded. And a shark can do a lot of damage before they figure out that you're not another fish. A perfect deduction. Most of our kind avoid the wilds for this very reason. You're like to get added to a hollow's cuisine if you're not exercising extraordinary caution. He tapped his skull and winked. And if a single bite lands here, your time has expired. They will taste the rejuvenated glial cells and enter a frenzy. Must be hard for a child your age, Liam said. He blinked. I beg your pardon. I mean, how old are you? 8. I'll have you know, you vitalized vagabond, that I am 10.5 years old. That's like 20 years in human time, and if you factor in my pre-hollow age, that puts me at well over 30. That used to be old enough to die for one's nation and father children. He raised a fist. And you dare question my expertise? I shall have you flayed. Liam couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Here he was, waylaid in an abandoned town in the middle of nowhere while a group of zombies cannibalized one of their own just a stone's throw away, and his only source of conversation was an undead child who acted like a Victorian-era aristocrat. Would things ever go back to as they were? It has to. I'm going to find where Nellie went, Liam said. Would you do me a kindness and keep a lookout? Mastermind grinned. Oh, now you wish to enlist my help. He sighed. You got me, mate. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have questioned your capabilities. You are an excellent hunter. Now do me this solid, yet. Of course, Liam. I would never dream of leaving you to die unprotected. That would be an obscene dereliction of my duties. He's really loving this one. Thank you. The pair made their way further down the road. No more hollows bothered them, which Liam could be thankful for. It wasn't long before they found the address, isolated at the end of an alley, and overlooking a nearby lake. His heart sank at the sight. The walls had been painted red, now maroon after years of decay. A large landing circumscribed the walls, fortified with sharpened pikes like the rest of the town. But the traps had been broken down, and by the level of deterioration, it had happened a long time ago. Liam took a step forth, but felt a tug on his leg. Do not jeopardize your safety unprovoked, Mastermind said. I shall scout these quarters for you. He wandered ahead before any protest could be made. Hope was still a possibility. Maybe they had built some kind of shelter below, and chose to lay low while the group searched their home above. It wouldn't be the worst idea. If they could keep out of sight, they would avoid becoming targets, whether by hollows or dregs or reachers or even other humans. Hiding would be the most intelligent way to protect themselves, and there was no better defense than pretending they weren't there at all. Liam buried his face in his hands. Oh, who are you trying to fool? This place was as abandoned as everywhere else. Whomever had been here had left ages ago, and there was nothing more that could be done about. No trail to follow, nor any thread to grasp. His family was gone. Where's Mastermind? Leah asked. Liam wiped the tears away. Inside. Don't worry, he's only been gone a minute. She studied the abandoned cabin. So this is the place, hey? Yes. Guess you were right on this one. Wish I hadn't been, she said, almost believably. Spare me, Leah. You've been chomping at the bit to say this was a waste of time. Might as well do it now, yet. She paused, her lilac eyes focused onto his. Whatever else was going through her mind had been masked behind the scarf she never removed, an indelible wall between her thoughts and the world outside. Look, she started. I'm Oi, Liam. Mastermind shouted. I've found something. He looked up. Yet? What is it? You'd best come and see for yourself. Liam lurched to his feet and bolted inside, his chest thumping. His mind raced. Was he about to find her body? Had Nellie never come here? Did Mastermind find a shelter below, after all? 1,000 questions clambered at once, each trying to find a foothold before being ousted by another. Liam froze, and his eyes widened. Another note had been nailed onto a post by the stairs. Our luck is quite unique, Mastermind said. One would assume this would have dissolved by now, given the time. But, fate appears to be on your side yet again. It almost looks as though it was written recently. Liam gripped the crinkled paper in his hands, still legible in spite of everything else. Dear Liam, it said. I hope you're still out there. I'm sorry, but we waited as long as we could. We really did. You won't find us here when you come, however. Food is running out and this community is falling apart, just like everywhere else. We can't stay. There's talk of the government setting up a camp in Aspen. This one's supposed to be better than the others. I know it's far and I know it will be dangerous, but I have to do what's best for Lilith. She'll die if we stay. Please don't stop coming for us. We can't do this without you. I love you. Liam crumpled the note in his hand, his eyes blurring. To hear Nellie's voice again in his head was too much. She was so close, and yet so impossibly far. He couldn't see straight. His thoughts were jumbling together, and the strength had rushed out of his limbs. Then Liam fell to the floor and his mind went blank. B1, Chapter 17, Munchkins, 1. Unlike the rest of their bone structure, the enamel of infected teeth can only strengthen over time due to a constant infusion of HBRS pseudocells from the salivary glands. You can add bites to the list of problems that will never solve themselves. Dr. Ava Sherman. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. 2 months after. Holy shit. Is he dead? Leah pressed her gloved finger against Liam Fenix's throat and waited for a pulse. No, Buttercup. He's just passed out. I didn't know humans could go to sleep like that, Kurt said. Leah winced. They don't normally. This must have something to do with the altitude and lack of water. We've been pushing him hard. We have. Look, you two do me a favor and get him in that bed upstairs. Let the guy rest it off. Buttercup frowned. I don't know, boss. This town's the only one we've seen for days, and it's right on the road. You sure we want to sit here much longer? No, Leah thought. I'd rather be on a boat, zipping off to the ass end of the world. Just do it. Liam Fenix got laid to rest and her crew went to work fortifying the place. The spike traps got reset, and a perimeter was established. Soon, Kurt went off to hunt, while Buttercup kept a low profile outside, scanning for threats. As shelter went, they could have done worse. The humans had done well to maintain this place before being driven out. The useless electronics had all been tossed to the wayside to make more space for storage and bedrolls. Varnish had been applied to the redwood walls sometime after the outbreak, and far less rot had set in because of it. The floor creaked less than she would have expected, and the weight of the roof pressing against the second floor showed little signs of giving way. Leah considered reapplying the grease she needed to keep her suppressor properly silenced, but found herself instead at the kitchenette reading while Mastermind did the same. She had lost all the books she'd pilfered from Liam Fenix's house during the firefight, but as luck had had it, her favorite novel had been stashed with her M16, so she wasn't without mental sustenance during these lulls. For all of Hades's ideas, using books as currency was perhaps his best. Hollowing accelerated when the mind went idle and existence became pointless, and nothing kept a brain busy like a good story. So long as readers could focus on something other than their miserable world, they could keep their reservoirs strong. And so that was what Leah chose to do now. As the oldest hunter, she had wealth beyond all others, and could get just about any book she wanted with ease, but this series had always had a special place in her heart, since the moment she'd first grazed her eyes onto its pages. It was a story about a teenage girl who fell in love with a vampire. In spite of the biological differences between the two, they somehow managed to shatter through the gap to form a tender relationship. Leah had read this particular novel more than 100 times, but the one advantage to Hollowing was that no memory stayed permanent, and so revisiting some scenes still brought her the same emotions as they had at first. Each read evoked senses that she seldom got to appreciate. It was as though her own soul hadn't trapped in this desiccated shell, and that she might find love herself. As if she wasn't any less than human. But Leah was still this undead creature, and this story was only a story. How fucked are we, Mastermind? Leah asked. A moment of silence passed unopposed. Go on, don't hold back. I know you've done the math already. Give me the numbers. He sighed. We are only averaging approximately 20 miles a day, spread over a 13-hour period. That reserves an 11-hour block for Liam to sleep, relax, and eat. The extra time has helped us to stave off harrowing, but our pace remains stymied by our human companions' limitations. Though by your own admission, Hades will believe that you originated in San Jose and not Reno, that presupposition will not hold true for long. Mother did us no favors by alerting everyone of our trajectory. Had she gone northwest instead of due north, we might have afforded ourselves more security, but I'd calculate that even if Hades does not know the final destination for certain, he will have sent advanced parties to watch every outpost east of the seaside area, both large and small. Our destination will be in that net, so he will not be far behind when we poke our heads out. And that is if we assume that he will not catch us before we arrive. Other hunters will have been contracted by now, with the reward incalculable. A single crew would have difficulty following our trail, but supplemented with biodiesel vehicles, long-range telecommunications, UAV imaging, and whatever hidden resources that Hades has at his disposal, and we cannot stay invisible much longer. Just give me a timetable, Leah said. He stroked his chin. 4 to 6 more days under our current approach before someone discovers our location. Whether we silence them or not, we can then expect a heavier response within 8 hours, the kind that we will not be able to defeat. I figured as much. What if we buy ourselves time? Maybe lay low somewhere else for a while. Obscuring our objective with an elongated route may provide us with more leniency, but that will also give our enemies more opportunity to entrench themselves in the region. I suspect that this strategy would create more long-term problems than solutions. After all, Mother does not intend for Reno to be our final destination. We do not know how far this contract goes. She buried her face in her palm. So what the hell can we do? Mastermind grinned. Have you ever heard of the old world technique of praying? I heard that it was quite a popular remedy for impasses like the one we're experiencing. Don't get cute. This is serious. I am at a loss then. She raised an eyebrow. I cannot remember the last time you've ever said that to me. He frowned. The unfortunate truth is that Liam's mortality is an albatross around our throats. Unless we can drive him to surpass his own limitations, he will get the rest of us purged, and there is nothing to be done. We do not have the speed, the manpower, or the nourishment to keep this game going much longer. He held up his book again. So I would argue that we'd best embrace the sanctuary we've been afforded and hope that circumstances change on their own. Leah fell silent and ran her fingers along the marble kitchenette top. There had once been a peaceful lifestyle here, long ago. She could just imagine the mother standing in this very spot, slicing up vegetables to supplement the fish her husband had caught, earlier in the day. One of the children would be playing in the living room with toys, and the other would barrel down the stairs nearby. The mother would scold them to be more careful. This was an old house, after all, and their father had only just bought it with the money from that big promotion. They hadn't let the house breathe yet. It was all a clever ruse, of course. The mother was only trying to balance her children's autonomy with their security. Children deserved to enjoy their young lives, free from harm. Innocence was a precious resource in a chaotic world, and letting them savor it to their heart's content was the virtuous path. Humanity had fought so hard and for so long to allow them this gift, so it was only reasonable that they reap the benefits that they had created for themselves. Thus, the mother would cherish and protect her children's own purity, just as her parents had done before. Leah dragged her nails across the counter. Why must she have been denied such luxuries? Sure, she could imagine such a life. She could even close her eyes and picture it, as she had done every time she'd read her novel. But she could never experience it for herself. The harrowing blunted all emotions, expunged the memories of those it affected, and rendered its progeny infertile. There was no childhood for her kind, nor any family to have for support. Those were extravagances of the living. Reitzers knew nothing other than patching the holes of their own reservoir, lest it crumble and they lose their souls. Bolstering the self was the sole paragon to strive for. The only virtue that mattered. Where the story of life was one of empathy and evolution, theirs was nothing more than postponing a protracted death. What value was a family here? And yet, a relic had entered their dying world and thrown it off balance. Liam Fenix lay above, dreaming of the family he wished to regain. He had driven his body to the brink of death in pursuit of this delusional goal of reuniting with them. It was a foolish, arrogant, and destructive burden he had thrust onto the rest of them, and one that Leah knew would be doubled the moment he awoke. For the living would die over their dreams, and his fate had been tethered to hers. Would she really go as far as Aspen to indulge this fantasy? Part of Leah yearned for the older days, before she allowed the parasite of hope to poison her own res. Things were simpler then, when she and the rest of the hunters roamed the wastes, killing anything that threatened them, with no regard for where it would one day go. The odds were no more arduous than how to survive the day, and the world was tinted only in shades of black and white. Survival was all that mattered, and the future was irrelevant. Leah sighed. She missed those days, now more than ever. B1, Chapter 17, Munchkins, 2. Do you remember when we first came together? Mastermind asked after some time. You mean before the sticks went up? Leah asked. No, I am referring to the time after the city was built and I lost my old crew. Mastermind had once led a group of hunters himself, and had been responsible for procuring the most vital supplies that early pandemonium needed. But they were all killed one day, so he came to Leah and offered to join forces. It was a pivotal change in their relationship. One that had defined the many shifts her own crew underwent. Of course I remember, Leah said with a yawn. We've been through too much together. Do you know what my old crew used to call itself? Can't say that I do. He smiled. The Munchkins. We were a strapping young lot, we were. All trapped in the frames of small children when the Halloween came, my Munchkins and I could get to the places that the rest of you could not. An ideal company for those who wished to scavenge undetected. I was not near as intelligent then as I am now, however, and thought that there was no need to pervert my ranks with elderly equals. Fighting seemed a pointless strategy for those who could evade with ease. But then a subway tunnel trapped us betwixt two hollow herds, and there was nothing to be done. My Munchkins became no more. He stared downcast into the floor. It was my vanity that got them killed. I did not choose adult-sized hunters because I wanted to prove to the rest of you that I was more than capable of surviving by my own prowess. By appeasing my ego, I had sacrificed my Munchkins on the altar of arrogance. Leah pat him on the shoulder. I've lost people too, mastermind. More than I care to remember. You shouldn't beat yourself up. But I must. Those who fail to learn from history are destined to repeat it, which was why I came to you and offered to combine our talents. You were respected for your aptitude, but also for your grace. There was none more willing to put the safety of others above themselves than you. If I was to learn from my mistake of placing my own pride above our community's safety, then that lesson could only be gained under your stewardship. Where's he going with his? Appreciate the kind words. That is why I must now ask you something very important. He paused, moisture building in his eyes. Why did you make the same mistake as me, Mum? Why did you choose yourself over us? Leah froze in place, her fingers against the counter. She shouldn't have been surprised that Mastermind would put the pieces together, but that did little to dull the pain of his words. It was worse than the disgust she'd been feeling with herself. Leah could have denied the charge, or pleaded ignorance, or grown angry that he'd challenge her, or simply changed the subject. She could have told him that it was complicated or that he'd never understand. What gave me away, was all that came out instead. Oh, an amalgamation of your recent behavior. The anger, the mood snaps, the propensity to force loyalty to you above mutual respect. You were not conducting yourself like the Leah I had first met. Why, I can't remember the last time I've seen you on pride. A red tear came free. When you left in pursuit of Liam on your own, I knew that you had bartered our souls in exchange for your safety. It was painful to see history repeat, Mum. Now her own eyes were starting to water. If it makes you feel any better, Hades gave me one fuckload of an offer. Partial ownership of Elysium, infinite food, full access to the library, the works. All to throw a couple friends under the bus. Then you are twice the fool I thought you were. Hades would have never let you reap the prospects of such a generous deal. He was merely manipulating you into doing the detestable for him. Leah nodded. I know that now. What can I say? Hades had me beat. He knew that if he dangled the shiny toy in front of my face, I'd walk straight into the trap, and bring all of you in it with me. Her nails dug into her palms. Just like I did when I started this mess by taking Liam for myself. It was all narcissism. But Mastermind stayed fixed. No, Mum. That is where you are mistaken. Saving the human was your moment of redemption, not of rapacity. You knew that there would be consequences for yourself, even if the others might persevere in your absence, but you chose to pursue that goal, regardless. A lot of good that did us. We're still dead in a week. Perhaps. He smiled. Or perhaps our story does not end here, and we will outlast this current crisis long enough to fight another day. Together. She dabbed back the tears. You're not going to tell anyone. It would be ill-advised to complicate our dilemma with more drama. I shall have plenty of time to scold you for your missteps when we have triumphed later. You can play the role of the melancholy maiden then, perhaps over a bottle of fermented salmon gore. She cracked up to that, somewhere between a laugh and a cry. Fuck. You're a better friend than me, Mastermind. Then let us remember the roles that have borne us so much success. Leave the strategy to me, and the leading to yourself, and we will all survive this ordeal. How the hell did he always manage to stay so positive? Even with the odds so far stacked against him and the truth of her betrayal unearthed, Mastermind was still willing to cast everything aside and play the pompous jackass like nothing had ever happened. Got anything to get us out of here faster? Leah asked. I don't think the human will be waking anytime soon. He winked. I have just the idea. B1, Chapter 18, Black Bronco, 1. These things are feeding off sunlight now. The lack of melanin production has allowed UV light to penetrate the skin, and infected ganglia are converting it into biomechanical energy. Another unintended mutation of HBRS exposure. So much for starving them to death. This just went from bad to fucked. General John Tyson. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. 2 months after. I love you, Nellie said, her naked form above his. Liam groaned. Oh, how I've missed you. It had been so long since the two had made love. So much time lost between them after he'd been trapped on purgatory. But now they were together again, and it was like nothing had ever changed. Her thighs rocked atop his waist and Liam stiffened to the touch. This was why he had struggled so hard to survive. He had spent so many years alone only because he knew that they would one day be reunited, and this was his reward. His soulmate recaptured, their love restored. Liam went inside her. Oh, how there could be no greater form of heaven than now. Nellie moaned as he caressed her legs, and gasped as he bit down on her breasts. The wind picked up around them and the curtains fluttered. As Liam thrust harder inside her, she matched his growing intimacy with her own intensity. Her nails dug into his skin, and she pressed herself onto him, harder and faster. Liam closed his eyes. There was nothing else in this world but the two of them. Life was but an exercise to find a companion, and they had found each other. The world's trifles were insignificant compared to their shared passion. Only the moment was real, and nothing else mattered. Then Liam opened his eyes, and found that Nellie had transformed. Her skin had gone pale, and her hair was now black instead of blonde. A burgundy scarf had been wrapped around her face, leaving only her eyes in sight, their irises twisted from blue to violet. He gasped. You can't. Liam tried to shift free. He couldn't let her turn him into one of those creatures. But Nellie was stronger than she looked, and used her lithe form to anchor him in place, still grinding against his groin with a rising zeal. Liam's arousal grew as she fucked him, and there was nothing to be done. His hands gripped the smooth, pale skin of her breasts, even as it peeled away, and his eyes were locked with hers, their demonic gaze begging for more. This was wrong, immoral, and outright disgusting, but he could not break away. Desperation had eclipsed caution, and it no longer mattered what form Nellie was in, only that he be with her. Liam would taste her carnal passion once more, even if it killed him. As Liam reached his climax, she removed her scarf, parted her blackened lips, and vomited forth a stream of maggot-infested bile. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Liam awoke with a curse, followed by another, the second louder than the first. The sight of Nellie had been replaced with mastermind, his childish face leaned in less than an inch from his own. What were you dreaming about? He asked, sucking on his thumb. Liam started. What? You were dreaming just now. He gestured to Liam's legs, where his erection was quite visible, even through the blanket. Looks like it was a good one too. What was it about? Liam spotted the embarrassment and horror. He reflexively threw his hands over his waist and batted mastermind away. The bastard scrambled to safety with a laugh. This could not have been more outrageous. Hey! Kurt shouted to mastermind. Stop being lazy and get down from there. I'm not carrying you two. The ground shook, and Liam blinked back the waking blurs. When did I get here? He was no longer in the cabin, but on the back of a gardening cart as Kurt dragged it down the mountain. The rusted metal web had been encased with pillows, with an additive blanket on top and below to keep him warm. The sun was full and shining, and the trees were blowing in the wind. We got tired of waiting, Buttercup said with a grin, his dragon oven in hand. Hope you don't mind. Liam tried to stretch, but found the maneuver not suitable, given the confined cage he'd been trapped in. How long was I out? He asked. All night and then some, Leah said as she strolled into view, her mascaraed eyes locked with his. She handed him thirsty. Here. Drink. His fingers graced the cold leather of her gloves, and Liam wanted to crawl out of his skin. He took his canteen back skeptically, doing his best to avoid making eye contact with Leah, lest she somehow read his mind and learn about the nightmare he'd just had. He really needed to see another woman in the flesh. Preferably one that wasn't a walking corpse. Liam downed a mouthful of purified mountain water. I appreciate this, but you didn't have to go through the effort. You could have just woken me up early if you wanted to save a couple miles. She chuckled. Early? No, you don't get it. We've been moving all night. Liam studied the world anew. The mountain they'd been on was far to their backs, and the crumbled asphalt road had been replaced with an overgrown dirt path. Red firs surrounded them where pines had once been. He looked for any sign of recognition and came up short. Just how far have they gone? Why the hell wouldn't you wake me up? He exclaimed. This isn't a marathon. We still have hundreds of bloody miles to go. What, do you think you'll leg it all in one go? You've thrown our sleep schedules off kilter. Leah rolled her eyes. Reitsers don't sleep, you idiot. Thought you'd noticed by now. Liam bit back the surprise. Between the shock of returning to a ruined wreck of a world and the stress of his own tribulation, he had only been focused on keeping up with the pace that Leah set, and never questioned why it was so high. That they never carried bedrolls of their own could have been explained as a propensity toward a rugged lifestyle, and never seeing them sleep had been written off as only fulfilling their needs after him. They were better maintained, after all. He floundered out of the cart and grabbed his backpack from Buttercup before he could suffer another moment of humiliation. Liam was good at mountaineering. He was very, very good at what he did. Whether it was scaling Kilimanjaro, traversing the Himalayas, surviving the Alps, or enjoying a stroll in the Urals, Liam had conquered them all at some point or other, if not for his show, Survive in Wild, then his own leisure, and he had done so with minimal equipment. Such was the nature of his work, and he had developed enough knowledge to become an aficionado of the craft, always capable of stressing the limits of his own abilities. Even a decade marooned had offered only a minimal challenge for a man of his talents. But to accomplish the task these creatures had set was nigh impossible. Leah had to be aiming to break 40 miles a day with minimal breaks, minimal food, and no sleep whatsoever. Not even the greatest athlete would be able to keep up with these inhuman measures, not for more than a couple days. The human body was only capable of so much exertion before failing. This was unreal. Whatever parallels that could have been drawn just a few nights before had now been dashed. The Reitzers were treating this trek as though it was a race, and one that they were overqualified to participate within. As Liam watched their bodies move with mechanical efficiency, he discovered an unavoidable truth. The human condition hadn't been eradicated like he'd been led to believe. It had just been replaced. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Days came and went as they tried to use this new system. Liam would march during the day until his feet were calloused and head light, then concede to his limitations and hop on the cart. His supplies would be dispersed between Leah and Buttercup, and Kurt would go back to dragging him along. But whatever early advantage they had gained was soon lost, as the main roads of Sequoia seldom ran due north, and the service paths in between were overgrown after so much time without use. Sleep started to become an issue again. There was only so much Liam could gain when his head would rock every 100 yards, especially since they were frequently forced to change altitude. Each day began to blend together, and his vision could never quite level out, no matter how much water he drank. Buttercup waltzed over, his dragonove strapped over his shoulder. A real oddity in a group of oddities. Liam would never understand where he found all his clothes. His leopard print business suit had been swapped with one that had a forest camo design, with the tie and vest to match. Apparently, he had one such suit for every environment, ranging from the urban to the desert to the aquatic, each size to fit to perfection. Ghillie suits were too vogue for him, apparently. He tipped his fedora, this one decorated with fish hooks attached. "What's the deal with you and that canteen, anyway?" Buttercup asked as Liam guzzled another mouthful from Thirsty. "I don't catch your meaning," he said. "Come on, you're trying to keep it quiet, but we all can hear you talking to that thing like it's a person. Is it your version of Wilson from Castaway?" Liam chewed his lips. "It totally is." He hadn't made the connection until now, but he'd been called out for using an inanimate object as a springboard for his subconscious fears. "How the hell have any of you seen Castaway?" Liam deflected. He shrugged. "Gets played every so often at the theater. I think it's one of the few original copies we have left. Good film, though I never understood why he talked to a beach ball. Why not go for a bird or something? At least those can kinda talk back. A ball is just boring. Hey, don't judge. I'll have you know that Thirsty was the one to keep me sane, you wanker. You'd have to take it up with the director, I suppose. Don't play dumb, Liam. I'm just trying to figure out how the living tick. Gotta learn how you work if I want to become like you. That's the whole point of this thing, right? We're all going to be alive when this mess is done. So why you doing the Wilson thing?" His cheeks reddened. "Maybe you get yourself trapped alone for 12 years and see what happens." He turned over. "What about you? Ever say anything to that rifle of yours to pass the time?" Buttercup patted his dragonove. "Well, yet. No reason not to compliment the fucker if he gets a good kill for me, though he's a stubborn Russian bastard. Always a bitch to find him ammo." Liam winked. "Then you know exactly how I feel. There's your Wilson." Buttercup chuckled after a couple seconds of thought. "Ha. You're not a bad guy, Liam. I could get used to hanging out like this, though hopefully not when we're trouncing through the wilderness." The sentiment's mutual. Liam scanned the peaks and tried to imagine how many more they'd have to traverse. "So what are you going to do with your newfound humanity, once the cure's been made?" His bright red eyes beamed behind the orange-tinted shades. "You're gonna love this one. What's the one thing Reitzers miss, more than anything else? Eating vegetables. Blat. No, those are still going to be shitty, New World Order or not. I'm talking long-term, friend. What can you do that we can't? Have sex? I'm afraid I'm at a loss. What can I do?" He grinned. "Have sex? The closest we can get right now is popping lust. It stimulates the sex organs, but only a fraction of what they used to be. Whole rooms for that in Elysium. Imagine how much bigger it'll be when we can do the real deal. There are zombie fuck pits." Liam was too tired to feel sick. "Don't think sleeping with everyone qualifies as a business, mate. It'll be better than that. I'm going to find all the hottest gals and guys who'd gotten the best skin jobs after the Hallowing, and I'll have them sleep with everyone for me in exchange for a cut of the profits. Won't just be for breeding either. I'm talking a place where you can go to have sex for fun. Everyone's gonna love it, and they'll pay big. So you're getting into the prostitution business?" "Nothing like that. I'll be too busy managing the administration. This isn't gonna be one girl on a street corner. I'm talking a whole organization with management, salaries, and a chain of command. So you're becoming a pimp and running a brothel?" He looked aghast. "You're not listening to me, man. I'm not going to be beating drugged-out chicks with a cane. I'm talking about a high-class service where clients can select the partners they want. No dating phase, no drawn-out engagement or expensive wedding, and no elderly priest as a middleman to arrange the whole thing. Just you, my employees, and a pile of pics. That's what this is about. I'm going to simplify the whole process for everyone involved." Liam smirked. "Buttercup, what you're talking about is exactly what prostitution is. It's an industry as old as time." Now he was the one to be embarrassed. "Yeah, well, maybe it'll be a good thing to bring it back then. You look miserable enough without it." "Can't say that I disagree with that, mate." B1, Chapter 18, Black Bronco, 2. The group kept moving for some time. The path they'd been following hit its predictable end, and they were forced to improvise by cutting through some more country. The ravine slacked into a plateau, and the group found themselves in an open field with only a small lake in sight. "Damn it!" Kurt shouted behind as a crash roared. The cart had tumbled again, spilling all their gear out. The wheels snapped. Leah marched over, examined the damage, and tossed a chunk of rusted metal aside. "We'll have to fix it." He grunted. "That'll take hours. We should just leave it. We're losing enough time as is." "No. We can't afford to take any more nights off." "I can leg it if need be," Liam said. I'm sure we'll find another if we dipped into town. No, she said with a tone that wouldn't be questioned. Mastermind will fix the cart, and Buttercup can get us something to eat. Her eyes narrowed on him. I'd suggest you take a nap while we wait, Liam Fenix. He shivered. Leah's mood had soured since they'd left Ponderosa. Every moment that Liam had spent sitting and relaxing, every second where he would massage a leg or take a drink, and her thinly veiled distaste worsened. It was as if he were at fault for all her woes, and not the other way around. What had he done to deserve such antipathy? At least the view wasn't all bad. Pines like emerald spears thrust into the mountains behind, rising up to stone peaks where the boundaries of sequoia adhered to the Sierra Range. The lake reflected the mountains above in a shade of navy blue, and Liam would have killed to jump into this lake and embrace its refreshing comfort, if only so he could prove that there were no hollows directly below its waves. He held a hand against the morning sun. Off in the distance, a herd of wild horses was grazing by the water. Maybe there's a better way forward, after all. Liam lumbered to his feet and walked over, slowly and carefully as not to raise alarm. Leah followed. Leave the hunt to Buttercup. He's already on it. These ones aren't for killing, Liam said. Then what the hell are you doing? Do you know what those are? She stared blankly. Horses. Liam bent low. What we're looking at here are Spanish Mustangs. You can tell because of the bushier tail and way that the manes fall over their coats. He nodded. I'd say this lot is prime stock, by the looks of them. So? Leah asked. He gleamed. It had been a long time since he'd had a sentient audience. They say that Columbus first brought horses to America on his second voyage to help control the New World, and it shouldn't surprise us to know why. Andalusian mares were prized possessions of the throne, and were known across Europe for their speed and stamina. But Columbus couldn't contain this breed for long. Between the Apaches and the Maya, raiding parties set hundreds of them free. These days, there are thousands of wild Mustangs in California alone. I'd reckon more, given everything else that's happened. She squinted suspiciously at him. Why are you talking like that? It's weird, like you're about to announce a prize. He ignored her and maintained his charm. Husbandry is a technique that predates the dawn of civilization, with some of the earliest wranglers as no more than nomads on the slopes of Kazakhstan. Though time has evolved and the process has grown more controlled, there's nothing to stop us from once again forging a bond between man and his original best friend. In a crisis as bleak as our own, it might just be our only hope. You want to ride those things? Are you insane? I need you to hang back, Leah. This is a craft that is slow and delicate. I wouldn't want you to get hurt. She snorted. Please. Like I'd let some horse knock me over. Then do it for me. We might not get another opportunity like this one. You're wasting your time, but fine, do whatever you want. She furrowed her brow. But when they run off after 5 minutes, you're back over here and sleeping. I won't burn another morning because you tired yourself out doing something stupid. And when I come back riding on top of one of these beauties, you'll owe me a shower. I don't care how you arrange it or how long it takes. I want to feel fresh water flowing over my skin again, and I don't want to hear any bullshit about hollows in the river. He held out his hand to shake. Does that sound like a fair trade? Her gloved hand embraced his own. Deal. With the stakes raised a tinge, Liam made his way forth. He narrowed his focus on the strongest of the bunch, a jet black male built like a bronco, with spots of white running down his snout. If Liam was to have any hope of capturing this ride before Leah lost her patience, it would be through going straight for the one with the least to fear. Liam closed the distance between him and his target, gently shooing the other Mustangs out of the way, never enough to force the herd to sprint off, but enough so that they would not interfere. The black Mustang kept his eyes fixed, scanning for threats. It was just the two of them for a time. The Mustang assumed a defensive pose as it waited for something new to happen, but Liam did nothing but stand and stare, studying every nuance of the creature's body language. Time pressed on as each remained locked, first 1 minute of silence, and then another. Liam became a rock, but the Mustang did not drop its guard. Finally, the Mustang turned away for a beat. Liam jumped forth half a foot and tsked. In a flash, the black Mustang reared its head and trotted to safety, well over 50 meters away. Leah stood back with the others, arms folded. Even from the distance, Liam could sense the premature victory she felt. But little did she know that this was part of the dance, and Liam and his Mustang had a long date ahead of them. He raised his finger to silence any objections Leah might make. Liam followed the black Mustang to the new patch of greenery it had claimed and repeated the technique, this time advancing one pace closer before stopping. The Mustang again examined him, scanning for more threats. His eyes remained fixed, and his posture stayed defensive, until such a time that he grew exhausted by the exercise. Only when the Mustang dropped his guard did Liam jerk forward and tisk again, forcing the Mustang into another retreat. This was a special technique employed by the gauchos of Patagonia. The goal was to tire their Mustangs out while also training them to accept humans as safe company. By only scaring them when they stopped paying attention, the Mustangs would learn that staring equated to safety, and aversion led to danger. Little by little, step by step, the samba continued. Liam would force the black Mustang to acknowledge him, and slowly condition the bastard into accepting his presence. The Mustang would rear his head and make a retreat, but never far enough away to surrender his territory, lest his pride be damaged. The other horses soon parted way for the two to enjoy their dance uncontested, with Liam getting closer by the minute. The day dragged on, and hours began to stack, but still Liam did not relent. Somewhere along the way, the work on the cart was completed, though the Reitsers no longer seemed to care. They had abandoned their own goal of an early escape in favor of watching Liam work. This was a game of chess after all, and one they had never seen before. After enough time and enough patience, the Black Mustang finally bowed his head in surrender. Liam had gotten himself into arm's reach by then, and no longer needed to scare his new acquaintance to keep his attention. The two exchanged each other's scents, and the Mustang no longer felt threatened. And now for your reward. Liam reached into his satchel and pulled out some wild carrots he'd taken from a derelict farm one day back. It would hurt to not enjoy them himself, but the Black Mustang had earned a prize for his patience. He was a worthwhile partner. There, Liam whispered, giving the Mustang a stroke on the mane. See? There's nothing to be afraid of. You've just been used to taking care of yourself and forgotten what it's like to have a friend. We'll change that, you and I, yet. Minutes came and went as Liam coaxed the Black Mustang further. His work was not yet done, and the most dangerous step was still to come. Without a harness and saddle, getting atop the Mustang's back would be nigh impossible for the uninitiated, but luckily for Liam, he had been trained to do just that for the show. Season 3, Episode 7, to be precise. The trick was to ease into it like an old man into a bath. Slowly but deliberately, Liam wrapped his arms around the Mustang, never applying more pressure than he had before, and always massaging the pain out of its tendons. When the water was warm and the moment just right, Liam hopped off his ground and onto the back. The Black Mustang lurched into a trot again, but did not try to kick him off just yet. That gave Liam the leniency to scramble further and wrap his arms around the head, where he could redistribute his weight and once again nullify any discomfort he had inflicted. The Mustang's trot slackened back into a walk. And just like that, the two had become one, and the dance was complete. Leah stared wide-eyed as the incomprehensible marched toward her. How the hell did you do that? Liam grinned. Give me more time, love, and I'll have one for each of you. By mid-morning of the next day, Liam had fulfilled his promise. It had been slow to start, with the Mustangs not giving his Reitzer companions the time of day when they drew near. Liam surmised that hollows were the natural predator to horses these days, and Reitzers would be indistinguishable. But once they had applied dung to mask their scents, the sailing became far smoother. His undead companions were more clever than they looked, and picked up on Liam's guidance faster than he would have suspected. When combined with the herd being more submissive in the presence of their restrained alpha, getting them on horseback became elementary. Leah claimed a milky white female for herself, with Mastermind sitting on her lap. Buttercup chose a pale babe as well, and the two fell instantly in love. Only Kurt remained on foot, but that was his choice. Don't trust anything bigger than me, he'd said before thrusting the extra baggage over his shoulder and marching away. As the group began to ascend the slopes again, Liam caught Leah peering his way. Deciphering the thoughts of his Mustang was trivial compared to reading Leah's mind from behind the opaque wall of her burgundy scarf, but there was a virtue in her eyes that he'd never seen before, and one that filled his heart with glee. It was respect. B1, Chapter 19, Return to Reno. My God, what have we done? Exactly as we intended, Director. We have allowed the human body to survive past death, perhaps indefinitely. Dr. Ava Sherman. Washington, D.C. 42 hours after. Everybody know the plan? Peter asked. Still not sure about this one, Darius said, giving his bald head a rub. Lot of Zeds between us and the drop. Marcella uttered a flurry of words in her native Portuguese. The shared doubt was apparent, even with the language gap. Peter sighed. Look, we don't have a choice. Without that food, we'll starve before the siege ends. A bomb went off nearby, as if to emphasize his point. And if we get eaten first? Darius asked. We won't if we stick to the plan. Remember, we've still got our secret weapon. He smiled and turned. Right, Leah. She gulped. Though Leah would never admit it, she was terrified, and not just of the soldiers. The Zeds had been trying to attack her too lately, and they were getting more vicious by the day. What if they bit off an arm this time? Darius frowned. You don't have to do this, Leah. You're our only hope for a vaccine, remember. She shook her head. No, I see Kendi do this. It's like Peter SS said. We need that food. It's settled then, Peter said. Everyone get in position. If we're planning on doing this, we gotta go now. The final preparations were made, and the group split apart. Leah pulled the hood of her jacket up and went out of their hiding spot. Reno had been devastated since the military showed up, with their goal of killing everything in sight, infected as well as not. Gunshots and explosions were never far away. Leah was still learning about the world, but from what she'd been told, most cities had descended into chaos like this. That was why she had to get out. If they were going to find scientists, then they had to get to somewhere safe. Leah was the key to ending this nightmare before it was too late. She'd turned into a Zed, but didn't stay mindless like the others. The cure was in her blood. It had to be. She rounded the corner, and her eyes widened. There were more Zeds around the airdrop than she'd expected. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. All salivating at the mouth as they wandered in place. A few glanced her way and stared vacantly, their eyes white and lifeless. Hey! Darius roared from further down the block. Over here, you fuckers. Look at me. Peter jeered next, and Marcella ululated louder than the two. The Zeds turned their way, moaned, and began to shuffle over. It was a good plan. Safe behind a concrete blockade the soldiers had set up, her friends could lure the Zeds without risk. And with Leah's immunity to bites and her ability to blend in among the dead, she was the best person to be on the ground. The path opened up as the horde cleared the way. Leah shuffled to the airdrop, hissing like the other Zeds. Step by step, closer and closer, she went for the prize. Once Leah got in arm's reach, she broke the act and tossed her duffel bag free. One armful after another, Leah threw all the canned food and meds she could reach into the bag. She had to get as much as she could for the group. They were counting on her. Suddenly, the sky erupted in thunder, and a jet flew above. Leah traced its trajectory as it sailed from the other side of the blockade, over her head, and into the horizon. A moment later, a distant apartment complex exploded in a cloud of flame and dust before crumbling to the ground. The howls of Zeds grew louder behind. No. Peter screamed. Come back here. Over here. Not there. But it was too late. The Zeds had been drawn by the explosion and then caught sight of Leah with a duffel bag filled with food. She tried to hiss back to throw them off, but the Zeds kept coming, mouths salivated at the prize they would soon claim. Run, Leah. Peter ordered. She scrambled for the exit, but a window smashed and another Zed floundered into the street, cutting her off. Desperation grew as she sought out another route, but more Zeds had peeled from the main group, and all were wandering her way. There were so many, and they were all so ravenous. Why wouldn't they leave her alone? Leah didn't deserve this. It wasn't her fault that she had an immunity. The Zeds should have been trying to let her go so she could help them. But their minds were empty and their souls gone, and now they would eat her too. Why was the world so evil? Fuck you. Darius bellowed from a nearby alley. He drove a crowbar into a nearby Zed, black blood splashing against his N95 mask and goggles. He waved Leah over, his hands wrapped in rubber gloves. Quick, Leah. Over here. Her muscles didn't work like her friends, and she could never move faster than a jog, but Leah pushed what strength she could to race to safety, dodging and ducking from the swipes of Zeds. A kin slipped from the bag, and Leah instinctively reached for the treasure. Darius yanked her behind the fence. Leave it. He shut the gate behind, and shoved a dumpster into its frame. And not a moment too soon. The second the gate had been reinforced, a dozen Zeds crashed into it. The dumpster moaned against the pressure, but did not give way. Darius grabbed the duffel and made a run for it, with Leah at his flank. The pair rounded a bend, crossed an empty street, and rejoined the group, once again safe in the corner shop they had taken as a refuge. Darius raised one of the cans in triumph. Woo. That's how we fucking do it in this house. It worked. Leah asked. She almost couldn't believe it. All thanks to you, Peter said. You saved our lives, Leah. Marcella spoke some more Portuguese, then leaned in. Leah stiffened as she was enveloped in a hug. Leah stayed frozen. She was still an infectious vector, and the last time someone had gotten this close, there had been 2 more in their group. But Marcella didn't seem to care about the risk anymore, and only embraced her tighter. Santa Leah, Marcella said, her eyes moistened as she embraced her savior. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Leah studied the ruins of Reno from atop her horse. It had been years since she'd been back here, and time appeared to have left it mostly untouched. The Nevadan desert had reclaimed some of the surrounding burbs, but downtown was still as trashed as it had always been. The place that had birthed her was just another ravaged, ruined, crumbling wreck, like everywhere else in this hellscape of a nation. Leah supposed that she wasn't doing much better. After weeks in the field, her skin was starting to wrinkle and erode. If it wasn't for the salon's worth of product that Buttercup kept in his own backpack, she'd be looking worse than Kurt at his best. We'll go on foot from here, Leah decided. You sure? Buttercup asked. Horses will attract hollows, which will raise our profile. There's no way of knowing who else is lurking around. Liam had done well to save them time. They had shaved half a week by riding Mustangs, and avoided search parties in the process. This added security was all thanks to him. Leah had underestimated Liam. She had initially assumed that his time marooned had rendered him helpless, but he was far more capable than she would have guessed. His ability to read the terrain and weather rivaled most veteran hunters, and after retraining him with firearms, his marksmanship wouldn't be far behind, at least when it came to bolt-action rifles. Apparently, he'd been using those for the better part of his life. In a different world, Leah would have loved nothing more than to ride out on a hunt with him. Preferably with the stakes far lower. Kurt nodded to the horses as the rest disembarked. What about them? We could use the meat. Leah ran her gloved hands across the soft mane of her pale mare. Kurt was right. They hadn't been able to wander off in days, and food was becoming an issue again. To execute these horses and feast on their entrails would buy them more time. And yet, as Leah stared into the dark eyes of her traveling companion, she thought of another world. One where Reitsers could coexist with the natural kingdom, and not be parasites to it. One in which survival was more than a zero-sum game, where the dead didn't feel compelled to drag the living down to extend their own time. One where the hunger wasn't all that drove them onward. One where there was another way. A better one. Let them go, Leah ordered. Kurt grimaced. I don't know, boss. We need to lay low anyway, and this much blood would only draw a herd. She gave the mare a whack on the ass. It broke into a gallop, back up the mountain they had come. Besides, they deserve it. The others followed suit, leaving Leah and her crew back on their own. After so much time, Leah could no longer map the maze of the city. She had hunted just about everywhere west of the Rockies, and had faced no shortage of close calls. Hundreds of injuries had rocked against the strength of her res, and now, the memories of 1,000 hunts blended together, each with a different origin and destination. To navigate such an amorphous nebula of thought would be nigh impossible for most. Leah pulled her scarf further up the bridge of her nose. There were some moments that could never be washed away. At the foundation of her reservoir, her most defining memories could still be found, and she could use them to retrace her path. Streets bore familiarity even if erosion had transformed them. One strand led to another. Her res hardened, and the maze unraveled. Soon, and she was back to the place where it had all begun. Isolated from the rest of the shopping center, a thicket of overgrown vines rose from the hedges, choking the stone brick walls and cutting between their seams. The tarps above the windows had once been red and green, but time had reduced them both to similar shades of brown. Though the letters had all fallen out and scattered, a giant statue of a chili still remained above the entrance. A reminder of what this place had once been. Leah walked through the entrance. This restaurant had been part of a popular chain in the old world, and she had seen no shortage of its derivation in the hundreds she had passed. The layout would always be similar, with the vaulted ceilings above a sea of tables and booths, and an array of lights and LED TVs overlooking the floor. But this restaurant was unique among its brethren. Many were like it, but this one was hers. It was here that Leah could trace her oldest memory and recall her opening moment of consciousness. It was here where she'd gained her scarf. "Lie down, Liam," Leah ordered. "Get some rest." He rubbed sweat from his brow. "Thanks. Everyone else secure the perimeter. Make sure nobody's around." Her crew dispersed, and Leah began to search for some sign of Mother's presence. Leah had shared her story many times to her, back before Mother had revealed a sliver of her own truth, and their relationship had dulled. The others might think of her as a beacon of hope, but it was her intelligence and arrogance that had doomed them all, and repairing what she had destroyed was far from a just recompense. Where Leah's story began in blind naivety, Mother's was bathed in sin. Were it not for her unrivaled expertise, Leah would have never assumed such a risk in trusting her. Leah went to the stockroom. Rusted cans lay scattered where she'd knocked them over, their spilled contents reduced to a thin, brown film. Dust shrouded the shelves, and cobwebs were rooted in the corners. A black stain sat at the center of the room, a reminder of the death that had occurred here. Leah ran a finger along the stain. The headless body had long since been removed and buried. It was the least she could have done, though she had never learned the identity of the person who had gifted her a soul. What could Leah call what she owned, if not life? She thought, she experienced, she felt. Though the cost was steep and the price could never be repaid, Leah still had her own story. Her own life. Others had been lost along the way. So many others. Sacrificed in the chaos of a dying world. But Leah still persisted, and it was in that tenacity where she had carved out her own story. Was it so wrong of her to survive, even where so many had died forever? Did her story deserve to end because theirs had to? She sighed. Would it ever end? Not today. On the opposing wall, their next breadcrumb had been placed. A knife had anchored a note into the wall, with the familiar script of Mother. Of course she had deduced the significance of here above all else. "Thank you for coming, Leah," it read. "I know what you are thinking right now. If only it was you with the gun and not her, you wouldn't be here, reading this very note. You would be in a mass grave as a collection of dust, and someone else would be facing this challenge. A pile of nothingness, safe from the pain. But you are here, and you have survived, and that you've found this note shows that your reservoir is still strong. It is that strength which you must now use to find me. Your story began here, but me and Hades originated somewhere else, far away. When the outbreak occurred and the world collapsed, a number of survivors from the government and EN Dynamic retreated to bunkers to study HBRS 15.21. It was in the walls of one where both mine and Hades' story began. It was there that I have taken up the work that our predecessors lost, and it is only there that humanity can be reforged. Go to the larder and talk to Vaughn. I've contracted him to procure a car that you can use. By the time you read this, he will have fulfilled that request. Don't worry, he can be trusted. You still have a long way to travel with Liam, however. Go east, past the deserts and the forests and the hills. Go to NORAD's base in Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. There, you will find what I have been building behind Hades' back. You will find the future that this world craves. Stay safe, Mother." Leah crumpled the note. Couldn't Mother have just said designed a cure, need living blood, go here for once? Always with the riddles with her. There was no way of knowing how large the complex would be, or what hurdles they'd face in trying to get inside. Everything past the continental divide was a dead zone, where no one bothered to travel anymore, and no more outposts were placed. No surprise that she would want them to go out there. Worse yet, Aspen was right along the way. Liam Fenix would force them to take the detour the moment the thought entered his head. Another unnecessary strand to follow. Another wall to bash their heads against. And if this one ended in tragedy? Leah struck a match to the note. One problem at a time. B1, Chapter 20, Auschwitz for Zombies, 1. You must always exercise extraordinary caution around the infected, even after the brain has been destroyed and they are no longer animated. Every cell becomes resurrected, so they're never truly dead. Dr. Ava Sherman. Manchester, New Hampshire. 3 months after. Just a little further, Liam told himself. You'll be fine. He wiped the perspiration away. Leah had said that there'd be a car to take soon. If Liam could just make it over this hump, he could convince her to drive them to Aspen. On foot, the trip would take months, but by car, they could be there and back in less than a day, and then off to wherever else Mother wanted them to go. He shielded himself from the sun and eyed the rising pillar of smoke on the horizon. The damn thing was getting larger by the second, and the smell was horrendous. What's the deal with this larder place, anyway? He asked. Why is it so far from everywhere else? Leah stared into the horizon. Even with all that's been built in Pandemonium, there are some services that can't be performed in the region, so we established a number of outposts to keep the city going, usually in other cities to make them easier to find, and each with a different purpose. Seaside is based in San Francisco, and combs the bay for fish. The farm sits outside Fresno, and provides feed for cattle. Oasis was made in Phoenix, and recycles old world trash into usable materials. And the larder. Exactly as it sounds. Turns meat into food. Among other things. Doesn't seem all that useful. I could have sworn you lot had all the meat you could get your hands on. Not all flesh is edible to us. The larder rectifies that. What do you mean? Her magenta eyes met his. Have you noticed that the moment we entered Reno, there hasn't been a single hollow? He paused. Now that she mentioned it, it had seemed rather odd that they weren't forced to sidestep the usual clusters of undead. Why, this part of the city was completely abandoned, and it might have been the first one they'd entered that was so destitute. The smoke on the horizon rose without remorse, and Liam knew the truth. You're cooking the dead? How is that even possible? Leah shrugged. Trust me, once you get near Vaughn, he'll tell you everything you want to know, and plenty that you won't. He's a good guy, but working 100-hour shifts tends to make Reitsers fixate only on their jobs, until it becomes all that defines them. Happens a lot in Asphodel, and doubly so in outposts. There's a reason why it's so easy for us hunters to get the best clothes and weapons. We can always find a guy willing to sink their soul into making high-quality gear for us, to the point that they'll forget about everything else. Vaughn's like that, so it's best to just nod along in silence to whatever he has to say. That's what I do. Liam gulped. Whenever he started to get complacent with this new world, it had a habit of giving his sanity a jolt. As he watched the black veil of soot and death, he suspected that he might never fully adapt to this resurrected society. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The houses and shopping centers became fewer and farther in between, and the sprawling metropolis eroded into an industrial center. Collapsed warehouses and rusted shipping containers became a common sight. The smell of death mingled with an effluvium of chemicals and oils, as all the drums and silos had burst after years of neglect. Ash fell from the blackened sky like grey snow, turning the grease below into an iridescent sludge that clung more to their boots with each step. Liam no longer felt the urge to fight the heavy clothes and respirator he'd been given. The discomfort of coughing into cloth was a small price to pay compared to the pain in his lungs by breathing these noxious fumes, and the sweat in his goggles paled in comparison to the sting that he felt whenever he took them off. Even his party seemed at odds with the toxicity they were wading through as they took regular detours throughout abandoned facilities to limit exposure. At least Liam no longer smelled the dung on his clothes to cover his scent. The oppressive force of burnt decay had overwhelmed every other sense. Finally, they reached the source of pollution. The larder was not a particularly massive building. The walls were grey and opaque, and stood no taller than 2 stories at any point, save for a giant tower in the middle that appeared to have been converted into an oversized smokestack. Even through the haze of ash spilling free, Liam could make out a faded, crimson aura reminder of the company that had been there before. Leah ordered Buttercup and Mastermind to stay nearby, using her hand gestures. Liam had been around them enough to learn their silent code. It was a strange mix of the type used by the military, along with her own private blend, and seemed to account for everything from tactical commands to what type of undead were lying in wait. There. Hide. Keep watch. She'd said. The rest made the slow march down the street, past the dead trees and grey grass, and into a maze of chain-link fencing capped with barbed wire. Sections of the yard had been cordoned off into dozens of mass-holding cells, with many containing several hundred hollows each. As the group marched by, the dead hissed and scraped vainly against metal grates. If Auschwitz had been made for zombies. Liam shuddered. A lone Reitzer stood guard at the main gate. His face was hidden beneath a gas mask and helmet, contrasted by the orange hue of a construction costume that gleamed under the fluorescent bulbs of the facility. When the group drew near, he gripped the handle of a pistol strapped to his waist. State your business, he said. Leah held her hands to the sides, with one holding the silver badge shaped into a wolf skull with crossbones. We have none. We're just a couple hunters looking to pass through. What do you think this is? A hotel. I'm thinking you're a group of friendlies who'll throw us a bone. She took a step forward. Vaughn in. No, the boss. It's been a while, but we go back. Tell him that his old friend in the red scarf has come knocking. He'll know who you're talking about. The guard relaxed a beat. All right, I'll go get him. But do me a favor and don't touch anything. There's talk of outlaw hunters in the region. Can't be too careful. She nodded. I understand. The guard wandered off, leaving Leah, Kurt, and Liam alone. Sure, this is a good idea? Kurt asked. We've been on the road a while. Wouldn't be hard for them to set up a trap. I don't like being exposed either, but Vaughn is solid, and he's the only one with long-range transport at his disposal. The guard did say there's outlaws in the area, Liam pointed out. Your friend might have already picked the other side. No doubt Hades will have spread his propaganda, but if Mother got here first, then Vaughn will know not to believe it, even if his people don't. She turned to Liam. Be sure to keep your voice low, just to be safe. He made his voice more brusque in compliance. You really trust her on this? Liam had only had a single conversation with her, and couldn't help but feel that she never revealed more than half of what was in her mind. Leah chuckled. I wouldn't trust Mother with a dead rat. She'd cut us all to pieces if she could get something out of it. But Vaughn? I used to do runs for him back when he helped set up the solar grid, and he never, ever reneged on a deal. He's a man of his word. We can trust that he'd keep us in confidence. Why do you hate Mother? Liam suddenly asked. Leah paused for a moment, her brow hardened. Because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. And I don't just mean here. Liam opened his mouth to probe further, but the door to the factory opened again, and a few more workers popped out first. Like the guard, all were dressed in construction outfits with reflective lining, but one stood apart from the rest. His helmet was white while theirs were orange, and his tool belt dragged against the bones of his hips as he strolled forth. Though his skin was as shriveled as a hollow and his cheeks were gaunt, his eyes had a heavy maroon tint, and his lips could still twist into a smile. Well, I'll be damned, he said. And here I thought you'd never come visit. He opened the gate and turned to the others. We're good here. You guys can get back to work. They wandered off. Leah nodded. Good to see you, Vaughn. Likewise, Leah. He embraced her. Glad to see you're keeping yourself together, all things considered. What have you been hearing? Nothing good from the big man, but enough from our mutual associate to know better. He scanned the yard one last time. Let's get inside. I'll give your friends a little tour, and then we can talk shop. Make it quick, Leah said. I want to be rolling out within the hour. Afraid it'll be longer. We just threw the car on the charger. It'll be a bit until the guinea has her back up. Vaughn winked. Don't worry though. You're gonna love what we've done with the place, and we'll be begging to stay by the time it's ready. The group moved to follow Vaughn inside. Leah flashed the all-clear signal to Buttercup and Mastermind when no one else was looking, and Liam once again prepared for whatever madness was about to come. B1, Chapter 20, Auschwitz for Zombies, 2. A whirlwind of mechanical noises exploded the moment they stepped through the door. Pistons were firing into engines, and steam was bursting from pipes. A number of drums lined the walls, each with a different colored slurry boiling in between. Some scarlet, others brown, others black. Vaughn turned to Liam. Ever see larding done before? Liam made the mistake of saying no before considering the ramifications. Vaughn's eyes lit up, and he grabbed Liam by the shoulder, his bony fingers rough against his overcoat. It's a shame that you hadn't come here a few weeks ago. Herd activity spikes during summer, and slows once fall hits. At peak capacity, this facility can process up to 1,200 stock a day. He led them through a catwalk and into the factory floor. There were a dozen of his people scattered throughout, each wearing the reflective construction uniforms and hard hats as they monitored the equipment. A series of caged ramps led from the exterior to the drums, with hollows crammed inside. Mannequins dangled above, just out of view for the hollows. The trick is to let them do the work for you, Vaughn explained as they drew near. Hollow psychology is simple enough that they only care about attacking the closest thing in sight, even if it'll get them killed. Like this. He grabbed a wheel in front of one of the drums and started twisting. Pulleys squeaked and the gate began to rise, but no sooner was it up that the mannequin lowered itself, shrouded in red lights. The hollows roared at the sight of the mannequin and marched forth, each tumbling into the drum before they could reach their targets. Vaughn grinned. Pretty cool, hey? Like how they used to cook lobster. Once we get them in the boilers, it's all a matter of rattan materials from one drum to another. He waved them forth. Come on. I almost forgot about the new distiller we installed. Gotta crack those hydrocarbons somehow. The group was led around the larder, with Vaughn showing off all in sight with glee. Here was where they turned marrow into food. There was the spot where fat got rendered into biofuel. That was the grinder that turned hollowing pseudocells into fertilizer. On and on and on he went, explaining everything from the mechanics to the science behind each aspect of hollow larding. Back in the good old days, Liam had known his fair share of craftsmen. There was one type of the laborer that he appreciated most, the ones who devoted themselves to a single art. The moment they sunk their teeth into a new inductee, they wouldn't let go until they had injected every ounce of their fervor into them. Not even Liam had found he could hold a candle to this breed of craftsman, and he was a man who had built his reputation by teaching survivalism to the masses. Whether it was an auto mechanic or a woodworker, there were some artisans who could never contain their zeal, no matter how hard they tried. The passion they felt for their craft was that significant, and was only rivaled by the delight they experienced when explaining all the subtle nuances of their work to anyone willing to listen. Vaughn was very much one of those, except that his craft involved turning zombies into paste. And boy, did he love every second of it. As it turned out, most of the trucks in Pandemonium had electric engines that ran off the solar grid, but because of that, they could never travel farther than 100 kilometers from the city for fear of losing all charge and burning out. That meant that all longer expeditions required vehicles that used combustion engines, and if Vaughn was to be believed, his processed biofuel was a superior alternative to refined crude oil, though Liam suspected this was prideful bluster. That was how Vaughn described all his products, anyway. The grease that the larder produced could keep a machine lubricated longer than most pre-outbreak brands, their fertilizer grew stock faster than GMOs, and the gum they produced was a viable alternative to living flesh for Reitzers, and could be stored for far longer. Vaughn treated hollows as the Navajo did for buffalo, and left no part as waste. Even dregs were filtered out by design, and released back into the wilds where they were given a chance to find their own intelligence. Liam was impressed by their ingenuity, even if it nearly destroyed his throat through the sheer weight of having to shout while also keeping it gruff to maintain his cover. The tour ended as Vaughn dragged them into his office, out of sight from the rest of his people. He sat across them and steepled his hands. As fun as it's been to see you again, Leah, I know that you didn't come all this way to see a couple new furnaces. I need to smuggle my friend here, Leah said. How far are we talking? Far enough to justify taking one of your long-range trucks. Electric won't cut it. We're talking more than 1,000 miles of distance to cover. He stroked his chin. Figured as much. Mother has had me get her the same deal plenty of times before. I thought that's what she was thinking last she was here, but she only wanted enough fuel to keep her people's bikes going, and said I should save the car for you. We've got a long ranger sitting at our forward operating base downtown. You know what she's up to out there? Leah asked. Not my place to ask. Half my guys owe her for one reason or other. Hell, I'd still have a limp if she hadn't patched me up herself. Mother is the only doctor willing to make the trip out to see us, and all she's ever asked in return is our discretion. If I have to turn a blind eye to a group of her soldiers rolling through, that's a small price to pay compared to what she's given back. Can we expect similar discretion? Won't lie to you, Leah. Hades has an axe to grind on this one. His goons pop by every couple days, and the reward for your head is steep. I can keep my guys under control for a while, but it'd go a long way if you could give us something we can use. Leah crossed her legs. Had a feeling you were going somewhere with this. We've been traveling light, and are lacking in ammo and food. That's fine. We've got plenty of both. Then what do you need? Vaughn leaned forward. I need a book. You know how it is in the outposts. Traders know that we can't access the bank, so they gouge us when it comes time to pay. Most of my stock is instruction manuals and address books, and we can't do anything with them, other than toss them in storage and hope. Getting supplies is the easy part. We have more food and tools than we know what to do with. Giving ourselves meaning is the real challenge, and nothing keeps back hollowing like a good book. You give us that, free of charge, and I guarantee that you'll have not just my loyalty, but everyone else's. We're still light on that front. This whole mess started in a flash. I'm sure you have something we can use. Leah sighed. Kurt always has a bunch of Vonnegut's on hand. That's where he named himself. I'm sure he can spare one. Kurt looked like he'd been stabbed. You can't be serious. He clutched his backpack as if it was made of gold. Vaughn waved a hand. Relax. Science fiction is too heavy for most of the guys here. We need something lighter. I've got a couple guys keeping watch outside, Leah said. One has a textbook about some kind of mathematics, and the other has a copy of Ulysses that he'll never read. I think he might have picked up a spy novel somewhere else too. He smiled. Come on, Leah. You're not listening to me. I'm looking for a good story. We both know that you wouldn't wander out without something of your own. Well? What is it? Leah paused, her eyes locked with his. For a moment, the two sat in silence, but then she glanced Liam's way and begrudgingly fished into her own backpack. Her hands quaked as she handed over the book. Liam nudged an inch forward. It was difficult to make out anything with the fog on his goggles, but he could almost read the title. Is that what I think it is? What's this about? Vaughn asked. It's about a teenage girl who falls in love with a vampire, Leah said. It's my favorite novel, and I managed to find a signed copy from the author. Vaughn sat unconvinced. Wasn't this the one that everyone used to make fun of in the old world? Liam had learned that Reitzers were incapable of blushing. The heart seldom beat and the blood flowed even less, meaning that normal emotions didn't present themselves as they would for living humans. So when Leah averted her gaze and twiddled her fingers in silence, her face might as well have gone bright red. Liam snickered. Leah furrowed her brow. It isn't like that. Humans were idiots. This story transcends the ages. There isn't mere imagery. Every scene is a tapestry of raw expression that you won't be able to put down. The love, the hatred, the beauty. It's a roller coaster of ineffable experience. I've read thousands of books, and I've never found any that was half as captivating as this series. Her voice rose as she slammed her fists on the table. And I'll cut out the tongue of anyone who speaks poorly of it. Oh, this is too much. Liam slapped his knees as he guffawed, and almost lost track of the forced gruffness of his voice. Beneath the psychopathic killer was a bleeding heart romantic, and she was doing everything in her power to pretend otherwise. Vaughn smiled in shared amusement. Relax, Leah. Now that you mention it, I think I saw the movie last time I was in Pandemonium, and I gotta say, it wasn't half bad. The book's better, she snapped, watching Liam laugh from the corner of her eyes with an acid gaze. If you say so. I know so. She stood up. But so help me, Vaughn. I'm not fucking around when I say that this is my favorite book. Take good care of it while I'm gone, or I'll... Yeah, Vaughn said with a yawn. Hack off a limb, take out an eye. I know the routine. I'll make sure this gets treated like royalty. She relaxed. Thank you. Just as the exchange was made and everyone settled down, Buttercup burst through the door, with one of Vaughn's men chasing after. Sorry, sir, the worker said. He scaled the fence before we could stop him. Couldn't wait, Buttercup said. This is important. Leah nodded to Vaughn, and he waved his worker off, leaving them back alone. What is it? Leah asked. Buttercup grit his teeth. Dust on the horizon. Trucks. I'd say 6 to 8. We've got to leave this place, yesterday. How the hell did they get here so fast? Liam asked. Can't worry about that now, Leah said. Is your car charged yet, Vaughn? He shook his head. Can't be more than halfway full. That'll have to do. We'll take it to your forward operating base and get the ranger. Add the repayment to my tab. You don't get it. Our fob is a maze and I hid it in one of the garages nearby. You'll never find it without me. Vaughn, if Hades finds out you helped us. It's done. I owe you both way more than him. All Hades has ever done is sit on the throne that we built. He grabbed car keys. About time the rest of us stood up.